You're standing at the mouth of a cave carved into a cliff in the far north of Anatolia. The air is colder here, not the crisp kind that wakes you up. This cold clings to your skin like a memory. You shine your flashlight into the dark, and the beam lands on a wall so smooth it could be glass. But it isn't. It's obsidian. Black volcanic glass, cold to the touch, carved from floor to ceiling with names. Names no one alive can read. That's how this starts. There are places in the world where history doesn't just disappear, it folds itself into the land like it's trying to sleep. Cities lost beneath the sand temples that breathe mist staircases that lead into cliffs and bells that ring when no one is near. These aren't legends passed down around fires. These are real. They're in excavation logs, field notes, even blurry photographs locked away in research labs. But they don't make the headlines because no one can explain them. And no one likes a question with no answer. You're about to drift through the hollow remains of the most rare and unexplainable civilizations to ever vanish. Some left behind elaborate architecture without a single bone. Others built with math so precise it outpaces modern engineering. A few left behind nothing at all, just shadows outline structures that seem to resist decay or detection. Some show signs of rituals far too advanced for their time. Others suggest contact with the stars. And every one of them holds a single eerie trait in common: they didn't fall. They simply stopped. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Now imagine this. You're walking alone through the Mongolian steppes. The grass stretches out like a soft green sea, and ahead is a road perfectly straight, carved from basalt, leading nowhere. It ends at a wall. Blank. No symbols, no door, just stone. What was it built for? Why is it still there? Or maybe you're deep in the jungle of Guyana, where mounds rise from the earth like sleeping animals. They're pyramids made of dirt, but shaped with too much precision to be accidental. And yet they don't erode. They don't collapse. They hold water inside them that no one can explain. You'll hear about a bridge in Scotland that appears only in the fog and disappears as if it were never there. You'll step inside a Peruvian chamber, 3,000 meters in the sky, that has no path leading to it, but still has ash from a fire that never scattered. You'll meet statues in the Amazon with hollow eyes buried in a forest so quiet it feels like it's holding its breath. And then there are the bells, the murals, the bones that never existed, the cities that mirror stars we've forgotten. These stories don't need monsters. The silence is enough. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started on tonight's journey together. You duck under a twisted root, the kind that seems too deliberate to be natural, and step into the soft quiet of northern Anatolia. The cliffs rise around you like the jaws of something ancient, moss-covered, slow breathing, heavy with memory. The valley here isn't on any tourist map. There's no signage, no marked trail, just a worn footpath that disappears and reappears like it's second-guessing your right to follow it. And at the center of it, all nestled beneath the shadow of a hill that looks more like a knuckle than a mountain, is the cave, or rather, what it became. You wouldn't notice anything strange at first. Just a pile of rocks, half collapsed, worn smooth by centuries of rain. But inside, deeper than any storm could reach, the walls shift. Not just in shape, but in texture. What starts as jagged limestone suddenly becomes something else. Something glassy. Something wrong. It's obsidian. Volcanic glass the kind used by ancient people for tools for mirrors for blades sharp enough to split hairs. But this isn't normal obsidian. You run your hand along it, and it doesn't feel like rock. It feels like metal left out in winter. Cold, slick, too smooth, too perfect. Not polished, not eroded, but melted and resolidified as if the whole chamber had been shaped by heat more intense than any ancient kiln could produce. And then you notice the names. They cover everything. Not inscriptions, not graffiti. Names. Carved in tiny narrow letters, so exact they could have been etched by machine. No overlap, no chisel marks, no hesitation, just names. Thousands of them. No titles, no dates, no order. Some are recognizable, Marcus Isca Solan. Others are long strings of symbols, spirals within spirals, or names so alien they don't even look pronounceable. One name is just a single vertical line. Another takes up half a wall and seems to flicker in the corner of your eye. Some are layered nested, like Russian dolls. One curls back into itself, like a snake eating its tail. Linguists came, historians, mythologists. None of them could make sense of it. The letters didn't belong to any culture, no Greek, no Sumerian, no early Anatolian script. Some faintly resembled linear, A. Others felt vaguely similar to proto-writing from Neolithic caves in France, but most were entirely new. A few names responded to sound. Whisper them aloud, and the room changes. Vibrations bloom in the stone. Light seems to bend. A low hum rises like the floor is remembering how to speak. Some names grow warm under your fingers. Others vanish in direct light, but return when the torches dim. The obsidian, when sampled, told a different story. It didn't match any known source in the region. No nearby volcano. No natural glass formations. Worse, it contained trace element synthetics that shouldn't exist in nature. A lab technician once said half-jokingly, "This looks engineered," then stopped laughing when the analysis came back. Titanium traces. Isotopes not typically found outside of industrial environments. That's when the team brought in the scanner. A grad student bored one night ran a digital trace of the wall. She was mapping names for pattern analysis, trying to create a timeline or a layout theory. But when she rearranged the names, center outward spiral formation, the results stunned everyone. The placement wasn't random. The names, when ordered spatially, formed a harmonic ratio, a mathematical structure, like music, frozen into stone. So they tested it. A composer was called in. He assigned tones to each symbol, fed them into a synthesizer, played the result, and the chamber responded, not loud, not dramatic, but a vibration. A low, steady hum, like the drone of the Earth's crust shifting, like wind across a mouth too large to close. It wasn't just sound, it was presence. Something alive in the stone. Something listening. That's when the locals stopped coming. Rumors started. Stories of people dreaming of the cave before they ever knew it existed. Of voices heard in the valley. One man claimed his sister vanished inside. No one believed him until it happened again. A graduate student mid-shift disappeared. Her scanner kept running. Her headlamp stayed lit. Her bag was untouched. But she was gone. No signs of struggle. No footprints. Not even disturbed dust. She was there, and then she wasn't. The project was shut down shortly after. The site sealed. The records archived under restricted access. The only image ever released shows a narrow corridor, obsidian walls shimmering in flash, and rows of names like fingerprints burned into the dark. but hikers still report the hum. You can stand near the valley's edge and feel it, not in your ears, but in your chest. A pressure, a rhythm, like breath held too long. And sometimes when the wind shifts, you'll hear whispers. Not speech exactly, not language, just syllables brushing past you, too soft to understand and too sharp to forget. Some say the names weren't meant to be remembered, that they're not names at all, that the chamber isn't a memorial, it's a vault, a prison, a lock. Others say it's a countdown, but no one knows what happens when the list ends. And maybe you don't want to. You wake up in a pine forest in southern Turkey. It's quiet, not peaceful quiet. The kind of stillness that doesn't invite rest but watches you. You're standing at the edge of a forgotten village where no road leads. There's no traffic, no power lines, not even a well-beaten hiking trail. Just pine needles soft beneath your boots, and a path that feels more remembered than real. Locals speak of a temple nearby. Not a ruin, not a shrine, a temple that comes and goes like breath on a cold window. They say it's carved into the face of a limestone cliff, but you'll never find it by looking. They say it appears when it wants to, and when it doesn't, it's simply not there. Not buried, not crumbled, just absent. Back in 1997, a group of surveyors contractors, not explorers, were sent to map the area. They weren't looking for mysteries. They were looking for elevation data. But one of their instruments pinged back something odd, a hollow behind a section of cliff where there should have been nothing but solid rock. They returned the next day with ground-penetrating radar. And there it was, an arched doorway, hidden beneath layers of limestone, sealed over so perfectly that the surface looked natural. But behind it, a temple, intact, waiting. Breaking through the outer layer wasn't easy. The stone was dense, unnaturally fused, not collapsed fused, like time had tried to erase it, and the mountain had reluctantly agreed. But once they got inside, the air shifted. You can't describe that kind of air in words. Dry, ancient, heavy with things not spoken aloud in centuries. It smelled like dust and memory. The temple itself wasn't large. No grand halls, no towering statues. But it was precise, symmetrical. The walls were covered in carvings, motifs of celestial maps and repeated patterns of eyes. Hundreds of them, watching from every surface. But no gods, no human figures, no animals. Just eyes, open, geometric, staring. There were no artifacts of power, no altars to name deities. But there were signs of life, recent life, a clay cup, a bundle of dried herbs, a half-burned candle still unused, a sleeping mat. Someone had been living there recently. Carbon dating confirmed it. The items were no more than 10 years old. But the stone temple itself, over 3,000 years old. Let that sit for a moment. The structure was ancient, untouched for millennia. But someone had lived in it within the last decade, and then vanished without a trace. Worse, there was no rear exit, no tunnel, no shaft, no back door. Just the entrance the surveyors had uncovered, and that entrance had been sealed from the outside for centuries. It didn't make sense. None of it did. When the team returned the next morning, the temple was gone. Not metaphorically, literally. The entrance they'd cleared had resealed. The limestone wall was solid once again. Their tools, their gear gone. The cliff face looked untouched, as if it had never been disturbed. The photographs they'd taken blurry, distorted. The majority were corrupted. Only one image remained, a dim interior shot, the altar glowing faintly in the camera's flash. That photo has since vanished. No known copies remain. That's when the legends began to reawaken. Among local oral traditions, there's a myth, rarely spoken one, that had never been written down. It tells of Anula, the still eye, a sacred chamber that appears only to those not seeking it, a place of balance, a temple that doesn't pray to gods, but to something older, something that predates language memory, even death. According to the myth, Anula is a sanctuary that only reveals itself in moments of deep imbalance in the world. Those who find it find silence. Those who enter it never return. Not because they are trapped, but because they choose to stay. They become part of the stillness. It's not death, the elders say. It's preservation, suspension, like memory in stone, like a pause that never ends. You might think it's just a story, a superstition draped in poetic metaphor. But here's what unnerved the researchers since 1997. Every few years, hikers report seeing the path to the temple. Just a glimpse, just a doorway. But by the time they return to show someone, it's gone. And when they try to retrace their steps, even the forest has changed. The trees don't match. The slope is wrong. The path winds differently. One man described it as walking inside someone else's memory. Another said he could still hear a faint hum, like chanting when he closed his eyes at night. Geologists have examined the area. The limestone is millions of years old. No signs of tunneling. No seismic shifts. No cavities behind the cliff face. It is by every measurement solid rock, and yet people keep dreaming about it. One woman, an artist from Istanbul, claims she sketched the temple in her sleep. She'd never heard of it, but the sketch matched the distorted photo perfectly. Down to the eye motifs, down to the altar. So what was it? A time slip, a dimensional fold, a temple that phases between reality and something just outside of it. Or maybe it's simpler. Maybe it's a sanctuary designed not to be found until you're ready. Maybe it listens, watches, waits, like the eyes carved into its walls, open, patient, unblinking. One archaeologist, now retired, said something that stuck with me. It's not that the temple disappears, he said. It's that we do. And maybe that's the truth of it. Maybe these places don't vanish. Maybe they slip into the folds between what we see and what we don't. And when the world becomes just quiet enough, when your breath matches the wind and your thoughts flatten into stillness, you step into their memory. And they remember you. You rise early before the sun crests the hills, before the birds resume their chatter. It's quiet in a way that makes your ears twitch, like they're waiting for a sound that hasn't come yet. You're in a small valley in Japan's Shiga prefecture, a place where the trees huddle close and the morning fog clings to every branch. This is cedar country, tall ancient trees with roots that twist like old fingers into the soil. Here, wrapped in mist and myth, stands a bell. It's not tall, not grand, not the kind of bell you'd expect in a great Buddhist temple. This one barely reaches your chest, and it sits not in a bell tower, but on a wooden platform open to the sky. There's no rope, no striker, no shrine. Just a dark bronze bell, squat and plain except for the pattern that wraps around it like a riddle. Its body is ridged in places, grooved in others. But what catches your eye is a single ring near the base that shimmers faintly, even in low light. When you touch it, the metal hums not loud, just enough to feel more than hear. The first man to find it didn't even realize it was special. Just a farmer clearing weeds. He thought it was an old war relic, Then he struck it once with the back of his hand, and it rang. Not a clunky clang, not a jarring gong. No, this was something different. A single soft note that drifted through the valley like smoke, and it didn't stop. Long after his hand left the bell, the sound lingered low, steady round. Even the birds paused. The wind seemed to hesitate. He brought it to the local temple. The monks were cautious at first. It didn't belong to any temple in the region. It had no family crest, no maker's mark. But then they heard it ring again at sunrise. Just as the first shaft of light touched the lip of the bell, it sang. By itself. One pure note like a breath drawn across a flute. They tried to explain it. Expansion of metal in the morning chill. Perhaps. But then it rang indoors. On warm days. Covered in cloth. Always at sunrise. Never at sunset. That's when people stopped offering explanations and started offering incense. Metallurgists were called in. They found the bronze to be unusual, more tin than typical. Denser too. And within the bell, tiny channels like veins ran through the metal. Not cracks, not flaws. Channels. Deliberate, intricate. No known technique could have produced them without causing the bell to collapse. It shouldn't resonate like it does. But it does. Every morning. One note. A historian from Kyoto dug deeper. He unearthed a 9th century scroll written by monks from a now vanished sect. It spoke of a sun bell forged not to call humans, but to greet the light. These monks worshiped vibration, not speech. They believed that every sunrise was a form of communion, and that sound was the purest prayer. Only 12 bells were ever made, the scroll claimed. 11 were destroyed in fire or lost in floods. One was never accounted for. Maybe this is that one. There's no way to know for sure, of course. The scroll doesn't give coordinates. But the match is uncanny. The bell has no mounting hooks. No place for a chain. It was never meant to be swung. It wasn't made to be rung. It was made to wait. The local villagers grew wary. They said the bell's note wasn't just sound, it was a call. To what they didn't say. They noticed strange things. Shadows that didn't match. People who stayed too long near the bell said they felt stretched, not in pain, not even in fear, just distant, like their thoughts didn't quite belong to them. One monk began waking each morning at precisely the same time the bell sang, not from an alarm, not even from the sound. He simply opened his eyes each day 1 minute before sunrise, like the bell had become part of his breath. Eventually, the temple decided to move the bell. Not to hide it, but to give it space. They carried it deeper into the hills, far from roads, far from homes. They built no shrine, just a wooden platform beneath the sky. And still it rang every morning. One note, soft, perfect, unstoppable. You can still find it if you're brave or curious. There's no trail marker, no tourist signs. But hikers talk. They whisper about a sound carried on the wind, a breath of music that shouldn't exist. If you follow the sound, you'll find the platform. It's moss-covered, but never rotten. The wood resists time. The bell stands in the center, untouched by rust, unmoved by weather. And when the first light of morning touches its rim, it rings again. Some say it's the earth itself remembering. Others believe it's a kind of clock, but not for hours or minutes. A clock of presence, of awakening. A marker not of time, but of attention. Every note is a whisper into the sky that says, we are still here. There are no guards, no fences, no warnings, But if you go gently. Don't touch the bell. Just listen. Stand still. Close your eyes. Feel the cold morning air wrap around you like old silk. Let the sound drift through you, not loud, but enough. Enough to remind you that vibration can move stone and silence can carry memory. And when it rings, you'll understand. It doesn't sound like metal. It sounds like something remembering your name. You're standing in the middle of nowhere. Not the poetic kind of nowhere. This is the dry, cracked emptiness of central Kazakhstan. There are no trees here, no rivers, no roads. Just a wide, yawning plain. Where the wind doesn't howl, it murmurs. And beneath your boots, the ground isn't just dust and rock. It's teeth. Yes, teeth. This place is called Zubna. The locals have a different name for it, but the one that stuck what it translates to is the River of Teeth. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. As you kneel down and brush the dirt aside, you see them. Not one or two, not scattered, but hundreds, thousands, fossilized teeth. Some are no larger than a grain of rice, worn molars, cracked fragments. Others are huge, serrated like saw blades, the kind that once belonged to creatures who ruled oceans and plains long before humans ever existed. There are no skeletons, no skulls, no femurs or vertebrae, just the teeth. The first people to find this place weren't even looking for it. In the 1980s, a Soviet-era geology team came out here to study soil erosion. They expected rocks, maybe mineral deposits. What they found glinted in the sunlight, white, hard, oddly shaped. Teeth embedded in the sediment, like coins in a fountain no one remembers throwing. They dug, and the teeth kept coming. Bison, camel, horse, saber-toothed cat, whale, shark, even ancient deep-sea predators whose remains should be found nowhere near Kazakhstan. No single species, no clear pattern, just a long, winding, dry riverbed choked with the fossilized leftovers of creatures that never should have met. Some from desert climates, others from coasts hundreds, thousands of miles away. At first, the theory was simple. A migration route, a place where animals returned year after year, and where many died. But the more they dug the stranger, it became. There were no bones. Bones decay faster than teeth, yes, but never like this. Never such complete absence. It's like someone or something gathered only the teeth and laid them here deliberately. Then came the arrangements. Some were clustered naturally, but others were placed. Spirals, lines, even rows perfectly spaced, embedded like bricks in a forgotten road. Who arranged them? Why, no tools had been found. No markings, no bones. Just these ancient ivory shards, as if a million jaws had come unhinged and poured their memories into the soil. Carbon dating didn't help. Some samples came back at 7,000 years old. Others at 50,000 years. That's not a simple span. It's an impossible one. The kinds of creatures these teeth belonged to weren't alive in the same epochs. It's as if the land itself gathered them across millennia and laid them gently in this gully like a museum for forgotten predators. Local folklore doesn't try to explain it scientifically. They just say the land remembers. An elder once whispered, "These are the teeth of memories. The earth keeps what it chews." You might laugh at that until you hear the stories. People say dogs won't walk across the riverbed, that even in summer, the air feels cooler here. That on some nights, when the wind shifts, you can hear a crunch beneath your boots, even when you stand still. Hikers have come back shaken, claiming they saw the teeth rise slightly as if nudged from below. Some believe they grow back. like something underneath keeps replacing the ones taken. Scientists, of course, scoff at that, but even they admit the number of teeth doesn't decrease. No matter how many are removed for study, more are found, always more. And then there's the glowing. About 40 meters from the center of the riverbed under ultraviolet light, a section of the teeth emit a faint bluish glow. The official explanation: phosphate buildup. Perfectly reasonable. Except phosphate doesn't normally glow in this way. Not this steady, not this uniform. People who spend time near this glowing patch report nausea, headaches, vivid dreams. One researcher even claimed to hear a low grinding like distant chewing just at the edge of hearing. You walk across this river carefully. The teeth crunch beneath your boots like brittle shells. Some of them look recent, too recent, white and sharp, as if they'd never spent a single day in the soil. But there are no fresh kills here, no predators, just this ancient silent procession of fangs, molars, incisors, an endless dental graveyard, with no jaws, no tongues, no explanations. And the question grows louder the longer you stay. Why just teeth? Where are the bodies? Why are they arranged? And if they were left here as offerings or warnings, who were they meant for? A theory whispered by a few and written down by fewer. The river isn't a burial ground. It's a feeding trough. That something below, something old, once fed here, or still does. And these are its leftovers. Not artifacts, not fossils, scraps. You look down at your feet. You see rows of canines, sharp enough to tear molars, ground smooth by time. And one tooth massive, black and cracked, pokes through the soil like it's just waking up. It's still sharp, and the dirt around it is undisturbed. You realize you've stepped into something the world meant to forget. Something that wasn't erased, but buried. Slowly, carefully, as if even the act of remembering might be dangerous. You step back, and something under your heel crunches. High in the mountains of northern Peru, the air thins until every breath feels like a small achievement. Clouds drift below you, now not above, moving across the valleys like ghosts that forgot where they were going. Here, where no path leads and no birds dare circle too long, sits something that doesn't belong. Not a ruin, not a temple. Just a room. 4 walls, no roof, no doorway. They call it the Sky Chamber. It wasn't discovered by archaeologists or even curious hikers. In 2007, a government mapping drone passed overhead and flagged something unusual, an anomaly in the cliffside, too regular to be natural. When a team was sent to verify, they found it a stone square balanced on a ledge thousands of feet above the tree line, flush against the edge of the cliff. It's no more than 4 meters on each side. Ancient, yes, weathered and eroded, but intact. The walls are made of stone blocks, some weighing over a ton, fitted so precisely that you can't slip a knife between them. No mortar, no tool marks, no trail leading up, no signs of scaffolding. And no one, not the Inca, not the Chachapoya, not any known culture in the region claimed to have built it. And yet it's there, waiting. You might think it's just another mystery ruin. Peru has hundreds. But this one doesn't make sense, because no one can explain how anyone ever got inside. There is no entrance, no steps, no rope scars, no tunnel from below, not even a narrow ledge along the cliff to inch across. It's as if the chamber grew from the rock itself. And inside, well, that's where it gets stranger. The walls rise only to waist height, as if whoever built it wanted a full view of the sky. There's no roof, No ceiling beams ever existed. But inside on the stone floor are 3 stone bowls arranged in a perfect triangle. They're unadorned, unmoving, untouched by moss or dust. And in the center of the chamber, right between the bowls, is a small blackened pile of ash. Just ash. No bones. No burnt wood. No trace of plant matter. Just ancient carbon. And that ash has never blown away. Not in the windstorms that rip across these cliffs. Not in the rain that lashes the rock. The ash remains, always in the same spot, always undisturbed. Carved faintly into the floor beneath the ash is a symbol, a circle with 4 intersecting lines. Not a known glyph, not a tribal marking, not Incan, not Chachapoya, not even pre-Incan. Some call it a compass. Others say it looks like a star map or a clock, but no one knows for sure. On the outer edge of one wall, a groove runs down toward the cliff like a channel, thin and deliberate, as if something once flowed from inside the chamber outward. Blood water paint. Samples taken from the ash proved inconclusive, just carbon, burned long ago. But the radiation profile of the chamber, yes, they tested it, is slightly elevated. Not dangerously, just enough to make you uncomfortable. And the wind here doesn't behave the way it should. Climbers who've reached nearby ledges say the air gets thicker the closer you get to the sky chamber. One described it as walking into someone's breath. Another said their ears popped not from altitude but pressure. Some report a buzzing in their heads like static just beneath the skin. A few claim they heard a sound, not a voice exactly, but a hum, rhythmic, almost musical. One climber, a veteran alpinist from Ecuador, swore that the chamber made no echo. He shouted toward it and the sound vanished. Didn't bounce, didn't return, just stopped. Another theory began to take root. The sky chamber isn't meant to be entered. It was built closed for a reason. Not as a place of shelter, but of observation. Or maybe communication. Astronomers studied it next. On the summer solstice at sunrise, a beam of light falls perfectly through the center of the chamber, landing directly on the ash pile. Not near it. Not beside it. On it. This isn't coincidence. Whoever built this chamber, whenever they built it, knew the sky. They understood the turning of the earth, the movement of the sun. And they built this place to mark something, to receive something. But what? No one knows. One fringe theory, wild, unsettling, and impossible to disprove, suggests the chamber isn't ancient at all. Not exactly. That it appears and disappears. That it's not made from stone laid atop the mountain, but from the mountain itself. A kind of geological glitch. A memory that reforms again and again. Every photo ever taken of the chamber shows the same thing. The bowls in the same position. The ash undisturbed. The symbol beneath unworn. Not faded by rain, not cracked by earthquakes. It's as if it never ages. Some believe it's still in use, not by people, by something else. There's no trail leading to it, no steps carved into the rock. No path worn into the grass. No one climbs into the chamber. And no one leaves it. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the sky chamber isn't for us. It's for the sky. A place where something once watched or waited. You can stand near it now if you're brave enough to climb. You can look at the walls. You can feel the wind tighten around you as if the air is exhaling through stone. But you won't get in. You'll never get in. And the real question is, who or what got in from the inside? You're in the forest again. But this one isn't like the pine-covered hills of Turkey or the cloud-scraped cliffs of Peru. This one breathes. You've come to northern Laos, halfway up a hill, too steep for casual hiking, in a forest that smells of damp stone and heavy silence. The trees are thick gnarled, their trunks furred with moss so deep it seems to trap time. The air here doesn't move the way it should. It wraps around you like a wet cloth muffling the world. And just before sunrise, the mist rolls in not a slow fog, but a swift, creeping tide of white. And that's when you see it. Not a statue, not a carving, a painting. On the inside wall of a collapsed temple, a wall you could walk by a dozen times in daylight and never notice. The stone is smooth, blank, and gray. But in the mist, colors start to bloom across its surface, faint at first, just shapes, smudges. But then they sharpen. Gold, deep reds, blues that feel too rich to be real. A mural, a massive one. You stop breathing for a second, not because you're afraid, but because something about the image feels like it's looking at you before you even understand what you're seeing. There are figures in the painting, tall, elongated, draped in fabric that shimmers with moisture. Some hold curved blades. Others raise their hands palms out. Eyes, so many eyes, are woven into the folds of their clothing, or drawn, floating in the air beside them. You count at least 9 constellations overhead, though you don't recognize a single one. And then, just as quickly, the mist begins to thin, and the mural fades with it. Gone. Not peeled, not faded. Gone. Stone gray again. Damp and quiet. Scientists have tried to study the phenomenon. Cameras fail. Photographs turn up empty or distorted, like the lens forgot how to see. Temperature sensors detect no change. Chemical tests show no pigment, no paint, no engraving. Just smooth stone that absorbs and reflects nothing. The prevailing theory that the mural is an optical illusion, a trick of the mist. Moisture activating rare minerals in the stone to create light refraction patterns like a mirage, but vertical. But that doesn't explain what people see, because not everyone sees the same thing. One botanist claimed to see 3 robed figures surrounding a dying tree. Another researcher visiting a week later described 7 standing figures holding bowls of fire. A monk said he saw only one, a figure with no face and eyes covering every inch of its robe. A visiting photographer saw something worse himself, but older, eyes closed, standing at the edge of the scene like he didn't belong in the story being told. He left that day and never returned. You begin to wonder, what if the mural doesn't depict history? What if it reflects memory, not yours? The temples, this structure built into a hill long before Laos had a name, has no inscription, no date, no local legend. Its stones are not native to the region. The layout is foreign, part Lao, part Khmer, with faint traces of ancient Chinese architectural influence. It's as if the builders came from different places and centuries, and then disappeared together. The wall with the mural is the only smooth surface. Every other stone is rough, chipped, weathered, but not that one. Not even insects touch it. Not even vines climb across it. It stays clean as if the forest itself agrees to leave it alone. Locals avoid the hill. They say the mural doesn't just show you something, it learns you. That each time you look, it changes based on what's inside you. That it sees your shape and finds something to reflect back, sometimes symbolic, sometimes too literal. Some believe the mural is a celestial map, one designed to track a rare planetary alignment that occurs only once every 12,000 years. A few researchers tried to overlay it with ancient star charts and found suspiciously close matches. The positions of the stars don't match the current sky, but they do match what the heavens looked like long, long ago. Still others think it's religious. Not a map, but a prayer. A fragment of devotion left behind by a sect that believed in mist itself, believed that truth wasn't found in light or form, but in transition, in the in-between, in what isn't solid. A temple that remembers in fog, that speaks in vapor, that paints not with pigment, but with atmosphere. One woman, a researcher from Chiang Mai, camped overnight at the site. She said the mural showed her a door, one not on the wall, but within it. She approached slowly, and as she drew close, the eyes in the painting turned toward her. All of them. Just enough to make her turn and walk away. She didn't speak again for 2 weeks. When she did, she simply said, "It wasn't for me." And maybe that's true. Maybe this temple isn't a remnant for humans. Maybe it was never meant to be preserved in stone. Maybe its message was designed to last only as long as the breath of fog that reveals it. Something ancient, humble, quiet. A story that rewrites itself depending on who's watching and how closely. The forest seems to agree. No animals linger here. No birds nest near the temple. Even the insects avoid it. There are no paths, no worn trails, no sign of fire or human encampment. Just moss, stone, fog, and every now and then, when the mist curls just right around the hill and the air grows heavier than it should be, you might see it too. Not a mural, a memory, and when it fades again, you'll wonder if you ever saw anything at all. The deeper you go into the Amazon, the quieter it gets, not because there's less life, but because the life knows how to hide. The forest here doesn't chatter. It listens. Every leaf seems to lean in. Every vine coils like it's mid-thought. The deeper you walk, the more it feels like something is watching from behind the bark, just out of sight. Eventually, the canopy tightens, swallowing sunlight. The undergrowth gives way to strange clearings, flat circular, too symmetrical to be natural. And in the center of these spaces, you begin to see them. Statues, dozens of them, carved from a dark bark-colored stone. They're worn smooth by time and rain, but still unmistakably humanoid. They have arms, legs, torsos, some child-sized, others taller than any person you've ever met. But they all have the same face, no mouth, no nose. Just a pair of wide, round, hollow eyes. Empty. Staring. They're not lined up in rows. Not placed like monuments. They're scattered, angled toward the dense heart of the jungle. Always inward. Always watching. No Amazonian culture we know of made statues like these. The stone doesn't match any quarry in the region. There are no roads leading to them. No nearby ruins, no evidence of camps or tools. It's as if the statues were planted here, not by people, but by the forest itself. The first outsider to document them was a botanist in 1972 studying rare orchids near the Purus River. He found 4 statues in a clearing, arranged in a perfect square. He took photographs, marked the location, and returned a week later with a research team. The statues were still there, but different. Not moved, not destroyed, posed differently. The same 4, the same stone, the same faces. But they stood in a new formation. One had raised its hand. Another tilted slightly to one side. The botanist never returned to the site. Years later, when the photos were finally published, they caught the attention of more than just archaeologists. The people who lived near the forest, the ones who already knew about the statues, started talking. They call the place Mata dos Olhos Vazios, the forest of hollow eyes. According to them, the statues aren't watching the trees. They're watching what's under the trees. No one has dared to dig. Not officially. Not deeply. But in 1999, a drone survey mapped the region and revealed something strange beneath the soil, a series of hollows like tunnels or chambers stretching in a vast network less than 10 meters underground. Geologists analyzed the ground. It's different here, softer, cooler, quieter. Even the insects avoid it. The air feels thick, heavy, with something that doesn't belong. One statue, found partially buried, had a faint spiral carved into its base. Not a word, just a symbol perfectly etched. That same spiral appears in petroglyphs across cultures from Europe to Oceania, always connected with cycles. Return. Time that loops rather than marches forward. There's more. If you map the eye directions of every statue, they form a loose circle, a boundary, as if they were arranged to contain something. Some researchers believe the statues were guardians' warnings left by an unknown civilization. Not to keep something out, but to keep something in. A seal. A ring of silent watchers. No bones have been found here. No evidence of mass graves or ritual sites. Just roots, soil, and silence. Yet something is wrong. Teams who venture in for more than a few hours report equipment failure. GPS freezes. Compass needles spin. One expedition lost radio contact for 2 days. When found, the researchers were unharmed but quiet, refused to speak of what they saw. One later wrote in a private journal, "It wasn't a forest. It was waiting." There's no scientific term for that kind of feeling, but the locals understand it. They say the statues don't follow you. They call you in. They whisper not with words, but with memory. A soundless invitation to look deeper, step closer, stay longer. A few locals believe the statues are alive, not animated, not possessed, but aware. That they are holding their shape by choice, like creatures pretending to be stone, until something tells them otherwise. Others are more poetic. They say the statues miss what was lost, that they were left behind by a people who once knew what the forest was and who it belonged to. And now the watchers simply wait. You approach one statue. Its eyes are wide, vacant, rimmed with moss, but you feel its gaze. Not in your body, in your thoughts. Like it's reading the way your mind breathes. You try to speak, but your voice dies in your throat. The air feels thick again, like pressure, like the moment before thunder or before a dream collapses, and then just barely you hear something. Not a voice, not even sound, a presence, breathing. You don't remember turning around. But somehow, you're walking away. The statues recede behind you. The forest slowly resumes its sounds. Branches creak. Birds chirp, wind stirs the canopy. But your ears still ring with something unsaid. Back at camp, you check your equipment. Your compass is still spinning. And on your boot wedged between the tread is a piece of dark stone. Just a flake, but shaped uncannily like an eye. The Mongolian steppe rolls out in every direction, like a sea of waving gold grasses bending in the wind clouds, drifting in slow motion across a sky so wide it almost aches to look at. Out here, the world is quiet. Not empty exactly, just paused. You feel it in your chest, like the land itself is holding its breath. And then you see it. A road, not a dirt path or worn trail, but a real road. Stone. Cut, placed, and fitted by human hands, though no one knows whose. It runs perfectly straight across the land, about 2 meters wide, its edges crisp and unnatural against the otherwise wild terrain. The stones are dark volcanic dents with age, not from around here, not from anywhere nearby. There's no village at either end, no ruins, no walls or temples, just the road slicing across the steppe like a scar. It's called Sagazanzam, the White Road, not because of its color, but because it glows faintly in moonlight, pale ghostly, the way quartz does when the night is clear. The name goes back generations among the herders who roam this region, passed down in hushed tones around fires rarely discussed in daylight. It's not just a road, they say. It's a promise, or maybe a warning. The first official report of the road came in the 1960s from a Soviet geological team surveying the area for mineral deposits. They found no gold, no coal, but they found the road. They followed it for nearly 14 kilometers, measuring its angles, cataloging the stone. Their notes say the alignment was perfect down to a fraction of a degree. No deviation, no curve. At the end of the road, they expected a city, or at least a ruin. What they found was a wall, not part of a building, not a fragment of something larger, just a single, perfectly flat slab of stone standing upright 4 meters tall and 8 across. It blocks the road like a dead end. No carvings, no seams, no door. Just an unbroken plain of black rock. The geologists examined it. The stone wasn't native. It matched samples from an ancient lava field over 200 kilometers away. Transporting it here across mountains and rivers would have required immense effort, planning, and purpose. But for what? No culture in this region is known to have built with stone like this. The Mongol Empire left no road systems of this type. Even older steppe civilizations used earthworks and wood. There are no records, no oral traditions that place a city or a fortress here. Only stories. The herders say it's a road that leads to something not yet arrived, or something that left long ago. Animals avoid it. Horses refuse to step onto the stones. Birds don't perch along its edge. Some travelers say that when you walk the road alone, you feel watched, not menacingly, not even curiously, just watched. As if something far away, not in distance but in time, is waiting for you to reach the end. Some scientists suggested it was ceremonial, a pilgrimage route, maybe a road for the dead, a final walk before burial. But no graves have been found, no ash, no markers, and the road is too perfect. Satellite imagery shows something stranger beneath the stones are massive buried columns, anchors possibly designed to hold the road in place against erosion, frost heave shifting soil. It wasn't just laid on the ground. It was built into it, meant to last, meant to endure. But for who? One theory suggests the wall at the end of the road was once a gate, not in a metaphorical sense, but literal, that it once opened. That's something someone passed through, and then it was closed. Forever. Some claim it's a thin place where the barrier between worlds stretches tight, that the road leads not to a place, but a time, that walking it too long alone changes you, not in body, but in memory. People have claimed to lose time here. Hours vanish. Others say the wind whispers names they've never heard before, names that make their hands shake. There are no carvings on the wall, but one researcher claims that just once when the moonlight hit the stone at the perfect angle, she saw something shift just for a second. A pattern, like a glyph pressed into the rock from the other side. It vanished when she blinked. She never found it again. They tried digging beside the wall. Only a few meters down the ground began to hum. Instruments spiked. One shovel cracked. The vibration wasn't strong, just steady, like a heartbeat. The excavation was halted. There are no ruins around the road, no settlements, no trash, no shards of pottery or lost tools. But here's the strangest thing: the wind doesn't cross the road. It runs parallel to it, always, even in storms, even when it shifts directions, as if something unseen is funneling it along the stones like a guide. Local shamans believe the road is a contract, that it was built as part of an agreement between us and something else. Maybe a god, maybe something older. They don't walk on it, not even in daylight. There's one more detail. At the midpoint of the road, where the grass grows shorter and the air feels oddly warm, a hiker once dropped a pebble onto the stone. Not remarkable, except the sound it made didn't echo. It didn't bounce. It just stopped, like the stone absorbed it. He tried again with a coin. Same result. Sound swallowed whole, just like the wall at the end. Maybe this place isn't a relic. Maybe it's a reminder, a path built not to carry us somewhere, but to hold something in place. And the wall. Maybe it's not a wall at all. Maybe it's a door that forgot how to open. You arrive at the edge of the hills in northern Iran, just as the sun begins to dip below the horizon. The wind here is cold and sharp, slicing through layers of fabric, like it's trying to remember your bones. From a distance, the village looks like nothing more than another pile of abandoned stone-collapsed roofs, dry wells, broken foundations. But then night falls, and the stone starts to shimmer. Not like starlight glinting off damp rock, not that soft. This shimmer feels deliberate. Every surface in this forgotten village seems to reflect light, but not like a mirror. More like obsidian. More like something meant to reflect something else, something above. The locals call it Ayane De, the village of mirrors. The name isn't poetic, it's literal. Walls, courtyards, doorways, even the interiors of crumbled homes are lined with polished stone. Not mirror glass, not even modern tile. This is something older, something darker. Volcanic glass, perhaps, but different. Too smooth, too responsive. You shine your flashlight down an alley, and it bounces back, not with your reflection, but with the sky. That's the part that gets under your skin. These mirrors don't reflect you. They reflect the heavens, even when there's cloud cover, even when the stars are hidden, even when the night is moonless and black as pitch. Look into the stone, and you'll see constellations. Not just scattered stars, full sweeping celestial patterns more vivid than the sky above. Some known, some not. Astronomers brought in to study the phenomenon were baffled. The reflections were accurate, too accurate. In some cases, the positions of stars shown in the mirrors match their locations from thousands of years ago, not the present sky. One mirror reflected the Pleiades as they were during the Neolithic. Another showed a vanished constellation, one not visible from Earth for nearly 14,000 years. It was as if the stones didn't just reflect light, they remembered it. At the center of the village lies a courtyard, exactly 12 meters by 12. Nothing grows here. Not weeds, not moss, not even the stubborn desert grass that takes root in the cracks of every other ruin in the region. It's cold too. Always a few degrees cooler than the surrounding land even in summer. You can feel it on your skin. The difference is subtle but constant, like walking through a doorway into memory. Stand in the center at midnight on a new moon, and the stars above feel closer. The air gets heavy, like the atmosphere itself is leaning in. Some say it's just altitude. Others say it's the village looking back. One of the few surviving structures, roofless, skeletal, and silent, contains a basin carved from a single stone. At its center is a black liquid that never evaporates. Scientists have tested it repeatedly. It's not water. It's not oil. It contains no known bacteria. It's inert, neutral, impossible. It just stays there, smooth, still, shimmering like a black lake in a bowl. If you look into it, you won't see yourself. You'll see the sky behind you, always behind. Turn your head. The sky and the reflection doesn't change. It doesn't track you. It stays focused on something you can't see. And if you stare too long, you'll start to feel like you've fallen upward. Tourists few, as they are, report strange feelings. Nausea, dizziness, a sense of separation from their own thoughts, as if they're watching themselves from across the courtyard. And always that sensation that something just out of frame is studying them back. Local legends say the village wasn't built for people. Not really. It was built for the sky, or for what lived in it. They say the stones don't just reflect, they respond. That on certain nights, the mirrors flicker. Not with light, but with movement. Shapes too fast to follow. Shadows that have no source. One shepherd claimed he saw a reflection of himself walking before he had moved. Another said the stones whispered to him, not in words, but in rhythm, like breathing or heartbeat. And then there's the silence. Birds don't fly over the village. Dogs won't enter. Even insects avoid it. Not because of poison or lack of food, but because it feels wrong. Not malevolent, just aware. Some researchers believe the entire site was an ancient observatory, one not built to observe the stars, but to be observed by them. That each wall, each mirror, each angle was positioned to send something back. Not light, not sound, but presence, maybe even invitation. There's another theory that the stars, the stones reflect the ones no longer visible in our sky, aren't memories of ancient constellations. They're markers, coordinates, a map not of the heavens we see, but of the heavens that once were, or will be again. Some of the mirror panels reflect different skies, not just different parts, different patterns altogether. Some match real star maps, others don't. But in every case, the reflections are locked. Not like a mirror, more like a window that refuses to move. Whatever these stones are showing us, they aren't changing with time. They are waiting for time to change back. Satellite thermal scans of the area show another anomaly. Faint, consistent heat signatures in geometric patterns, as if something beneath the ground beneath the mirrors is active. Not hot, just warm, like an engine cooling off, or a thought still in motion. There's no danger, at least none recorded, no disappearances, no violence, just the unsettling sense that the village isn't as empty as it looks, that it's watching, that it's listening, that it's ready. And when the sky finally shifts, when the stars fall back into place, the village of mirrors might finally open its eyes, and you might not like what it sees. The steps that lead into the ancient Bhutanese temple are worn from centuries of use. Each one dips slightly in the center, bowed under the weight of silent feet. The mountain here rises with a kind of solemn grace, its cliffs hugged tightly by mist, its valleys echoing only the sound of wind through prayer flags. There are no tourist buses, no guidebooks, just stone sky and quiet. They call it the Temple of Still Breath, and at the heart of it, is a room no one has ever entered, a room with no door, not locked, not blocked, no door at all. The discovery came by accident. In the 1960s, after a minor landslide shifted the temple's outer wall, a restoration team brought in seismic scanners to check for internal damage. What they found instead was an anomaly, a hollow space sealed behind several meters of solid rock, roughly 5 meters wide, 8 meters long, and completely inaccessible. No entrance, no passageways, just a chamber suspended inside the stone. The outer walls showed no signs of tampering. No sealed archways, no collapsed tunnels. The stone was ancient uniform, unbroken, like the chamber had been carved from within the mountain and never meant to be reached again. The monks said it had always been there. Even the oldest scrolls in their possession, fragile, worm-bitten and inked by hands, long turned to dust, mention a room behind the altar. A room that is not meant to open. Not because it is cursed, not because it holds something dangerous, but because it is finished. That word appeared again and again in the translated passages: finished, not complete, not sealed, not forbidden, finished. In 1972, a group of geologists from India and Bhutan requested permission to study the room using non-invasive imaging. The monks agreed reluctantly. The scan results, when they arrived, left more questions than answers. Inside the chamber stood a raised stone platform. Resting on it was a rectangular object, possibly a sarcophagus, a box, or a container of some kind. Beside it, spaced evenly in a half circle, were 4 tall, slender, upright shapes. Not random, not natural. Too symmetrical to be anything but constructed. Possibly statues, possibly something else. After 3 days, the monks halted the research. Politely, firmly, the temple doors were shut again. Years passed, but the questions didn't. What was in the sealed room? Why was it built without a way in or out? And how could anyone have constructed such a space without tools, without tunnels, without evidence? In the 1990s, technology had advanced. A new team returned with infrared scanning equipment. They were permitted only one test. This time, the readings showed something stranger. The stone platform in the center of the room was slightly warmer than everything around it. Not hot, not even truly warm, but not cold. And remember, this temple sits at high elevation. Temperatures drop below freezing for months at a time. There's no electricity, no sunlight, no airflow. Something inside that room was holding warmth. That was when people stopped calling it a tomb and started calling it a presence. A third scan in 2003 used ground-penetrating radar. The structure was still there, unchanged. But one detail caught everyone's attention. The 4 upright figures had moved, not far, just a few inches closer to the platform. Too small a change to be coincidence, too deliberate to be random. The team blamed a data error, a glitch in the software. But the raw data told the same story. Something had shifted. The monks closed the temple to researchers permanently after that. But rumors continued. Every winter, as snowfall blankets the mountain and the outside world fades into soft white silence, a low hum begins to emanate from the sealed wall. Not a vibration, not a chant, a tone, steady, unchanging. Some say it rises just before dawn and fades by midday. Others claim it continues all through the coldest months, like a breath the mountain is holding until spring. One monk called it the heartbeat of the stone. No one speaks of it directly, not in the village, not in the capital. But among the monastery's caretakers, the sealed room is treated not like a danger, but like something sacred, something sleeping. And that raises the question, what if the chamber isn't a tomb at all? What if it's not holding a body but a moment? What if the sealed room is not for us to open, but for something within to remain untouched? Some believe it's a temporal vault, a space carved not just from stone, but from time itself. That the moment sealed inside is still unfolding very slowly, too slow for us to perceive, but fast enough for the four upright figures to move, inch by inch, year by year. There's an old Bhutanese proverb, time does not pass, in the mountain it collects. And maybe that's what this room is, a collection of something the world wasn't ready for. In 2017, a small tremor rattled the region. Not unusual for the Himalayas, but this one struck precisely beneath the temple. Witnesses reported a low groan from within the mountain like stone, adjusting to make room. The monks sealed the outer wall immediately. No cracks were found. But that night, several pilgrims reported hearing something. Not the hum, not chanting. Something like stone scraping across stone, like a lid sliding open. Since then, the temple has remained closed. Pilgrims are still allowed to approach the outer halls to leave offerings to pray. But the inner sanctum, where the sealed chamber sits in silence, is off limits. Not out of fear, out of respect. Because some rooms aren't doors. They're endings, finished, and whatever lies inside that room, with no entrance, no air, and no voice, has nothing left to say. In the cold, misty highlands of northern Scotland, where the hills rise like waves, frozen mid-motion, and the lochs lie black, and still, there's a story that's never been written, only whispered. Shepherds pass it on. Hikers swear they've seen it, but no one ever finds it twice. They call it the bridge in the fog. You don't find it by planning. There are no coordinates, no trailheads, no road signs. You stumble upon it always at dawn, always, when the fog is thick enough to erase the horizon. And then quite suddenly, it's there, a narrow stone bridge, arching over a shallow ravine that shouldn't exist. The stones are dark and wet-smoothed by centuries of weather, but never worn. There's no moss growing on the sides, no lichen creeping into the cracks. The construction is ancient yet flawless. There are no handrails, no lanterns, no path leading to it. Just the bridge, emerging from the mist like something drawn out of memory. And once you cross it, everything changes. People who've walked across the bridge report the same odd sensation. The slope of the ground never shifts. You don't feel the arch under your feet. It's like walking across flat ground, even as you see the rise and fall of the stones. Some say the air gets colder. Others say it gets warmer. A few say the sound of their footsteps disappears entirely. No echo, no crunch of gravel. Just silence. Then they reach the other side. They turn around. And the bridge is gone. Not hidden, not obscured. Gone. The ravine. Also gone. In its place, a field or a thicket of trees, or even solid rock. Nothing to suggest a bridge ever existed. Nothing to suggest it should. The first known account of the bridge in the fog was written in 1831 by a Scottish traveler named Elliot Winmar. He was hiking between two small villages when he claimed to have crossed a narrow stone span beneath heavy mist. He marked the location carefully in his notebook. When he returned 2 days later, there was nothing there. His journal reads, "Upon turning back, not 10 paces later, It was gone. The land was flat and empty. I was entirely sober. He referred to it as a road between mornings. Since then, dozens of reports have surfaced, always the same description, always under the same conditions. No one has ever found the bridge in the afternoon. No one has ever seen it under a blue sky. And no one has crossed it twice. In 1978, a man named Owen Clark, a local forestry worker, disappeared while surveying the hills. He was missing for 3 days. When found, he was barefoot, dazed, and drenched in morning dew. He said little, only that he had crossed a bridge he didn't remember finding, and found himself in a village he couldn't name. He described the place as quiet. Stone houses. No smoke from the chimneys, but warmth from the hearths. No people. Just faint music in the trees, soft lilting like flutes in the distance. He stayed there, he said, until the mist returned. When it did, the bridge appeared again, and he walked back, but he never found the village again. He returned to the site dozens of times, always at dawn, always in the fog. But the bridge never came back. Some said he'd gone mad. Others believed him, quietly. Twice in the past decade, shepherds have reported something stranger. Entire flocks of sheep, normally docile, predictable, were found grazing miles from their pasture with their hooves damp and traces of black stone between them. No rain had fallen. No roads led there. The black flecks embedded in their hooves matched the basalt of the bridge, except there is no basalt in that part of the highlands. Geologists examined the samples. The stone was dense, volcanic, and laced with strange inclusions, tiny silver-like threads running through the grain. Not natural, not known. A hiker, in 2009, managed to capture a photograph of the fog, just as it began to clear. The picture showed nothing at first, but when enhanced, a faint silhouette emerged, a curved shape, unmistakably, a bridge. And on that bridge, just barely visible in the haze, stood a figure, arms outstretched, not waving, reaching. No one else was there that day. No one else was supposed to be. The photograph has since vanished. One copy remains in the personal archive of the hiker who took it. He doesn't show it to anyone anymore. Theories, as always, abound. Some say it's an illusion, a trick of light and fog and sleep-deprived brains. Others believe it's a time slip, a wrinkle in the fabric of memory where past and future briefly meet. A few even think it's a test, a crossing meant for someone else. That those who find the bridge aren't chosen, just noticed. That the bridge is looking for something or someone. And then there's the question no one wants to ask. What happens if you cross it and don't come back? What if Owen Clark wasn't meant to return? What if the flocks that wandered into the mist weren't lost, but sent back? And what if one day the bridge appears for you? You'll feel it first, the cold edge of air thick with moisture, the silence where there should be birdsong, the slow drift of fog wrapping around your knees. You'll take a step, maybe two. The stones beneath your feet will feel dry, impossibly dry, as if untouched by the dew, clinging to everything else. You'll walk. The echo of your footsteps will fade. The world will narrow, and then you'll be there, at the center of the bridge mist, all around the world behind you. Vanish the world ahead. Waiting. Just be careful, because if you turn around and it's gone, you may have crossed into a place that doesn't remember how to let you leave. The wind howls less here. Up in the Himalayas near the border between India and China, the cold doesn't feel like weather. It feels like silence that has turned to ice. Snow doesn't fall in flakes. It just appears settling on the world like a second skin. Here in this spine of the world, nothing moves quickly. The air is thin, the trees are few, and life clings to the stone like it's hiding. And yet in 2012, something stirred. Not the ground, not the sky, but a glacier. There wasn't an earthquake, no thunder, just a subtle shift in pressure, a groan soft and low, as if the mountain itself had exhaled. And with that sound, a wall of ice cracked open. What it revealed wasn't rock, or fossil, or even bone. It was a statue, buried deep inside the glacier, facing outward like it had been waiting. Black stone, perfectly symmetrical, roughly 4 feet tall, and still unsettlingly warm to the touch. It was geologists who found it, not archaeologists. A team studying the retreat of the glacier due to climate change. They noticed the shape buried under a sheen of ice and began clearing it, carefully, slowly, using only warm water, because any sudden change in temperature could fracture the find. It took them 3 days. What emerged left them speechless. It was humanoid, not quite human. The face was close, the eyes too large, the lips too full, the arms too long, fingers pressed together in front of its chest like a gesture or a warning. It looked peaceful, still, but wrong in the way a puppet is wrong. Every detail is just slightly off. And then there was the warmth. Though it had been buried in solid ice for what tests suggest was hundreds, possibly thousands of years, the statue did not retain the cold. When touched, it felt like skin, not in texture, but in temperature. Alive, the stone wasn't local. That much was confirmed early. In fact, it wasn't from anywhere in the Himalayas. No matching volcanic origin. No known mineral composition. It was closest to obsidian, but denser. And it rang when tapped just faintly, like striking the side of a bell that doesn't want to wake up. Then came the carvings. They weren't visible to the eye, not until the team ran an infrared scan. That's when the inscriptions showed up, etched across the back in lines so thin they seemed like scratches at first. Not any known language. Not Sanskrit, not Tibetan, not anything remotely human. But they repeated 7 symbols again and again. A sequence, a pattern. Some believed it to be a name. Others thought it might be a mantra, or worse, a command. 3 of the 5 researchers who handled the statue began to have dreams, not vague ones, identical ones. They each described a vast black valley. No sky, no stars, just endless, depthless dark. And in the center of that void stood the idol exactly as it appeared in the glacier. Waiting, watching. They said they heard something in the dream. Not speech, more like whispers through stone or wind beneath water. They woke up cold, shaking. One refused to go near the statue again. Another left the research project entirely. The idol was moved to a secure facility in Leh for further testing. Locked behind glass, monitored constantly. But then the ice came back. Not around the statue, around the case. Humidity remained normal. The room was heated. And yet, each morning, a thin film of frost would form on the inside of the glass. The base would shimmer with ice crystals that spread outward like veins. No other surface in the room was affected. Just the glass, just around the idol. They aimed infrared cameras at it. The temperature dropped 2 degrees around the object each night. Sensors picked up no movement, but one technician said that in the minutes before dawn, the statue always looked different. Not changed, just less still, as if it had exhaled. No one wanted to say the word alive, but no one denied the possibility either. Then came the monk. A local lama was invited to examine the object. He entered the room, looked through the glass, and immediately stepped back. He would not approach. He did not pray. He simply said in a dialect so old the translator hesitated, "It is not made by hands." Then he left a bundle of dried herbs at the facility gate for the dead, and the frost grew thicker that night. Eventually, interest in the idol faded. It was never made public. No museum ever claimed it. The documentation was filed archived and quietly buried under layers of bureaucracy. It now sits in cold storage cataloged as Ice Figure 001. No one goes near it anymore. But here's the part that still haunts the few who worked on the project. In 2018, another statue was found. In Greenland, same size, same material, same pose, except the hands were different. Where the first statue's hands were pressed together, the second's formed a curve. Together, the two gestures seemed to create a shape, a message, a beginning. The second idol was shipped under wraps, quietly, silently. No one knows where it is now, but sometimes, just before sunrise, the frost on the original idol shivers. Not cracks, not melts, shivers, like it's remembering the cold it once left behind, like it's listening for the sound of the other and waiting for the rest of the sentence to be spoken. The mountains of central Anatolia are jagged and dry, their slopes streaked with shale and shadow. From afar, they look untouched, just wind-scraped spires rising against the Turkish sky. But in one valley, where even shepherds rarely pass, there's something that doesn't belong. Something too sharp, too deliberate. It juts from the earth like a broken tooth. The locals call it the needle of the earth, but it's not a spire. Not really. It's the tip of something much bigger, something terrifyingly deep. At first, archaeologists thought it was just another worn monument, a stone pillar with weathered inscriptions and half-lost history. But when a ground-penetrating radar scan was conducted in the early 20th century, what they found turned every assumption upside down, literally, because the structure didn't rise into the sky. It sank straight down, more than 300 meters into the earth, perfectly vertical. No breaks, no collapse, no natural layering. Just a continuous shaft of carved stone uniform in width smooth on the interior walls, descending farther than their equipment could scan. Like someone had built a tower and then flipped the world over to bury it point first into the crust. This was no simple well, no forgotten silo. It was a tower, inverted, and it wasn't empty. Further scans showed that every 20 meters or so, there were chambers carved into the sides like balconies or alcoves, each symmetrical, each hollow. Dozens of them. And though no one has ever seen inside, the scans show sharp, rectangular edges. Precision, as if someone or something was meant to be inside, or had been. The tip of the structure that juts from the surface is only a fragment, maybe the top of a capstone or the very edge of a design. It bears symbols that defy translation. Spirals wrapped in triangles, lines converging on what looks like an eye. Not like Sumerian or Hittite, not even like Linear A or Indus script. Just other. Efforts to excavate were made. Drilling attempts failed. The stone was harder than granite. Diamond-tipped tools dulled within hours. Heat sensors malfunctioned. Equipment batteries drained rapidly. Eventually, the project was deemed too dangerous and too expensive. They sealed the surface with a reinforced dome. But that didn't stop everyone. A Turkish historian named Isa Yilmaz spent 15 years researching it independently. She believed the tower was referenced in obscure religious manuscripts, scattered references to a root of heaven, a place not of worship but containment. She proposed that the tower wasn't meant for human use at all. It was an anchor, a tether, a prison, designed not to ascend toward the divine, but to pin something in place. Below, her most disturbing theory came from a 12th century manuscript found in a remote monastery near Erzurum. It spoke of that which rises must be held fast, and stone upon breath, breath upon silence, silence upon the mouth that waits. Yilmaz believed the shaft was built to hold something that could not be killed, only weighed down, only buried deep enough that it might forget the sky. In 2014, a private research group acquired permission to conduct a deep sonar sweep. Their equipment was the most advanced to date high-frequency seismic imaging magnetic mapping multi-layer sound probes. They found that the shaft continued another 800 meters beyond previous estimates. Still straight, still symmetrical, still endless. And then their instruments went dark, not broke, stopped. Flat readings, like they were no longer scanning Earth, but something that refused to reflect. Before the system shut down, one brief flickering data point was recorded an upward echo. A seismic rebound from far, far below, as if something down there had moved. The data was never officially released, but a technician leaked a fragment of the final readout. It was one line of numbers, a repeating pulse, 11 seconds apart, 4 beats total, then silence. That silence has lasted ever since. Locals won't approach the site now, not even out of curiosity, not because they fear ghosts or spirits, because they fear noise. They say that if you stand near the dome at twilight, when the wind stills and the shadows settle, you can feel a vibration beneath your feet. Not constant, not urgent, just steady, like breath or waiting. No flora grows within 100 meters of the tower. Birds fly around the valley. Insects avoid the rocks. Even moss refuses to take root. Geologists have suggested natural explanations, magnetic anomalies, ancient lava tubes, seismic pressure differentials. But none explain the shape, the uniformity, the unnatural precision. None explain why a perfectly vertical shaft, at least a kilometer deep, would be carved from a single column of stone, one harder than granite, older than the cultures who even knew how to quarry, or why the alcoves inside would be spaced evenly, symmetrically, like cells, like rooms, like seats. The tower isn't broken. It isn't decayed. It's sleeping. That's the belief, now whispered among those who still study it, that the structure isn't inert, it's dormant, that it was never designed to do something. It was built to stop something. And the worst part, it's listening. One local elder once said, "You ask what it holds. I ask what happens when it stops trying." No answer was given, just the wind and the endless hum beneath the earth. The sun scorches the horizon in deep red as you step into the Kalahari Desert. The air here carries an ancient silence, broken only by the wind brushing over the dunes, like a whisper trying to remember its own voice. This place stretches for hundreds of miles across Namibia, Botswana, and South Africa, vast, dry, mostly empty, but something might be buried beneath it, something once seen and never seen again. They call it the lost city of the Kalahari, not because it's an old myth passed down in tribal stories, but because someone once walked through it, drew it, described it in detail, and then it vanished. The man was William Leonard Hunt, a Canadian-born showman, better known by his stage name, the Great Farini. He was a tightrope walker turned explorer. In 1885, he embarked on an expedition across the Kalahari and returned with something more than just sunburn and spectacle. He claimed to have found ruins, real ones, massive stone walls, arched gateways, the remains of a road or walkway that stretched through the sand, half buried, half crumbled. He described structures built from worked stone, not natural formations, not boulders, but human construction eroded and forgotten by time. He even brought sketches, not vague scribbles, but detailed drawings, columns, walls, what looked like towers. He presented his findings to the Royal Geographical Society in London. Some were intrigued, others were skeptical. There were no coordinates, no exact map, just notes based on days of travel through a harsh and shifting environment. Still, people listened, and then came the silence. In the years that followed, no one could find the city again. Explorers returned to the region again and again, drawn by curiosity, ambition, and obsession. Some were funded by universities. Others came alone, clutching copies of Farini's drawings like treasure maps, but none of them found it. Instead, they found sand, endless dunes, harsh sun, illusions. Some found strange rock formations, dolerite outcrops, weathered by wind into strange shapes. But none matched Farini's descriptions. None held the geometry or the patterns of deliberate design. None matched the roads, so the legend began to fade. Farini was accused of exaggeration, of mistaking shadows for walls, of hallucinating in the heat. But then came the satellite imagery. Decades later, in the early 2000s, new high-resolution satellite scans of the Kalahari showed faint rectangular outlines buried deep beneath the sand. Too straight, too consistent, shapes not made by nature, and questions returned. What if Farini didn't make it up? What if he stumbled upon something real, and the desert simply swallowed it again? There are older stories too. The Sand people native to the region tell of places in the desert that are cursed. Not haunted, cursed. Places where no one returns, where the air hums and the animals refuse to walk. They don't call it a city, but they say there are old things beneath the sand, old paths, old stones. One theory suggests that 10,000 years ago, the Kalahari was wetter, greener, and capable of sustaining permanent settlements. Lakes shimmered where now there's only dust. Rivers flowed. People lived and thrived until climate changed everything. Perhaps a civilization rose here hidden far from the Nile, far from Mesopotamia. And when the rain stopped, the wind came. And with the wind, the burial. Other theories are less academic. One explorer claimed that during a sandstorm, he saw columns rise from the ground, stone pillars poking out of the dunes like teeth. He said they were smooth, worked, and then they vanished again under the shifting earth. Another said he followed what he thought was a stone path for nearly half a kilometer only for it to suddenly end in open sand as if it had been unfinished or broken. No evidence, no proof, but always the same feeling. That something is beneath your feet, and it doesn't want to be found. In 2011, a team equipped with ground-penetrating radar found signs of unnatural density beneath a ridge. They planned a full excavation, but after a series of mechanical failures, including every single drone malfunctioning in mid-air, they abandoned the effort. Their official report cited technical and environmental instability. Unofficially, the team leader said the ground hummed. Not a sound exactly, a presence, like walking on the roof of something sleeping. The Kalahari doesn't give up its secrets easily. The sand shifts constantly. One week's ridge is the next week's hollow. GPS data becomes unreliable when entire dunes move. But the curiosity doesn't fade. Some say Farini didn't just find ruins. He stumbled into something sacred, not a city. A gate, a place not meant to be remembered, but not quite forgotten either. The strange part, Farini himself became distant about the discovery in later years. He continued to lecture, continued to travel, but when asked about the city, he often replied with vague comments. At one point, he wrote some doors open only once, and some shouldn't be opened at all. So what did he see? A mirage, a misidentified rock outcrop, or something real? Something the desert reclaims every time we get too close. Today, modern technology continues to sweep over the Kalahari drone's LiDAR satellites. And still, we get only glimpses, outlines, faint anomalies that vanish on closer inspection. It's like the land is hiding something with intention, not just erosion, not just time, purpose. You can walk across the sand for hours and see nothing but sun-bleached emptiness. But then the light changes, or a gust of wind pulls back the surface, and suddenly you see it a line too straight, a shape too exact, and for a moment you wonder, did I just see a city, or did it see me? The deserts of Central Asia hold stories the world rarely hears. Between the jagged mountains of Afghanistan and the parched plains of Turkmenistan lies a forgotten memory, not preserved in legend or scripture, but buried beneath centuries of dust. You wouldn't notice it from the air. It doesn't shout with pyramids or spires. But if you dig just beneath the surface, you'll find geometry, precision, cities that shouldn't exist. They call it the Bactria-Margiana archaeological complex, or simply the B-Mask, but no one knows what they called themselves. They had no written records, no surviving myths, no known script. And yet, what they left behind suggests a level of sophistication rivaling the greatest civilizations of their time. 4,000 years ago, during the height of Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, it began in the 1970s when Soviet archaeologist Viktor Sarianidi went looking for Silk Road outposts and instead found cities, entire cities laid out in perfect shapes, buried beneath sand and scrub. Circular walls, square courtyards, roads that ran straight for hundreds of meters, temples at the center of every design carefully aligned not to rivers or terrain, but possibly to stars. These weren't villages. These were planned civilizations, and no one had any idea they were there. The walls were made of mud brick, yes, but they were consistent, mathematical. The foundations formed concentric circles in some cases, squares in others. Citadels, storage complexes, ceremonial halls, all built with intent. These weren't defensive structures. They weren't cobbled together from necessity. They were mapped, designed, executed with an architectural understanding that feels shockingly modern. And then, nothing. They vanished. No evidence of invasion. No signs of fire or mass graves. No gradual decay. Just silence. Like someone folded the corner of a page and forgot to come back to it. Inside the ruins, Sarianidi's team found something even stranger: artifacts unlike anything seen before in the region. Seals stamped with abstract designs and animal motifs. Ceremonial bowls made of stone and metal carved with obsessive detail. Beads made from imported lapis lazuli. Ivory combs. Even golden ornaments. And then there was the residue. In several ceremonial vessels, traces of a drink were discovered, a mixture of poppy cannabis and ephedra, a sacred elixir. Some believe it was an early version of soma or haoma, a powerful hallucinogenic potion described in Vedic and Zoroastrian texts. A drink meant to bridge the gap between human and divine, between flesh and spirit. So who were these people? Some scholars argue they were Proto-Iranians. Others believe they were early Indo-Aryans, related to those who would later shape India and Persia. There are even suggestions of connections to the Indus Valley civilization. Their goods certainly reached far glass beads from India ceramics influenced by Mesopotamia and architectural similarities to early Harappan structures. But none of this explains why they disappeared, or why they left no language behind. It's as if they chose to be forgotten. Some theories suggest environmental change. The rivers that once fed the region may have shifted or dried up. Crops could no longer be sustained. The cities may have become unsupportable. But if that's the case, why are the buildings still so perfect? Why were the temples left untouched? Why does no one mention them in the oral traditions of surrounding cultures? It's like they were scrubbed from memory, and yet the precision remains. Even today, satellite imagery reveals more ruins beneath the sand still unexcavated. Dozens of cities, hundreds of buildings, locked away by geography and more recently by geopolitics. The region is difficult to access, remote, tense. Few archaeologists can safely dig there, so the cities wait, still buried, still aligned, like a network of forgotten thoughts just beneath the world's surface. It's not just the layout that's strange, it's the logic. These cities show evidence of long-term planning. They weren't thrown together. They weren't trial and error. Whoever built them understood urban space, how to organize it, how to direct foot traffic, how to build layers of use into a single location. It's the kind of design we associate with later empires. But these people had no empire, just stillness. Some believe they simply walked away, moved south, blended into Persia or India, taking their beliefs and aesthetics with them. Perhaps they changed their names. Perhaps they stopped building cities and started telling stories instead. Others think something else happened, something less ordinary. Because here's the strangest part. These cities don't feel like ruins. They feel like blueprints, like a prototype civilization, a model of what might come later, refined and perfected in the hands of others. It's as if they were testing an idea, seeing how far they could take geometry order, sacred architecture, and then once the design worked, they vanished. They didn't leave a message. They left a template. And now, when you stand at the center of one of these ancient city circle walls stretching around you, temple ruins precisely aligned with where the sun rises during the solstice, you don't feel like you're in a dead place. You feel like you're standing in a system, a memory that still functions even without people waiting. Perhaps these people never intended to be remembered by name. Perhaps they believed the shape of a city would be more eternal than the sound of a word. And maybe they were right. Close your eyes and try to imagine the Sahara not as it is now, but as it was 10,000 years ago. Not dunes, not endless stretches of lifeless dust, but lakes, green grass, rivers that shimmered under the sun, and people moving, building, living. It sounds impossible, but it's true. Before it was the largest hot desert in the world, the Sahara was one of the most fertile regions on Earth. Rain fell regularly. Trees spread across the plains. Animals migrated freely. And scattered across this lush landscape were humans not just surviving, but thriving. Archaeologists call it the Green Sahara, or the African Humid Period, a chapter in Earth's history when changing climate patterns pulled the monsoons northward, transforming the desert into a massive grassland. But there's something else hidden beneath that sand, a kingdom, one that left behind no name, no scrolls, no kings, just stones, symbols, graves, and the suggestion of a civilization that may have laid the groundwork for one of the most powerful empires in human history. It began with rock art in southwestern Libya, near the borders of Niger and Algeria, lies a mountain called Gebel-Uweinat. There on sheer rock faces, early explorers discovered paintings, not scratches or abstract shapes, but vivid lifelike scenes. People dancing, herds of cattle, boats floating across water that hasn't existed in millennia. These were not wanderers. They were communities. They had ceremony, music, art. Nearby, massive stone enclosures were found. Not the crumbled remnants of huts, but carefully constructed mounds and walls, burial sites, possibly. Cemeteries arranged with symmetry graves oriented to the stars. One site contained the skeleton of a woman buried with jewelry beads and pottery. Beside her, a cow was laid gently on its side as if sleeping. A burial ritual that suggests reverence for the dead, for the animals, for the cycle of life. These weren't nomads, they were residents, and their culture extended across what is now a hostile desert from Mali to Egypt, from Chad to Algeria. Another site, Nabta Playa, sits deep in southern Egypt. Thousands of years before the first pyramid, a circle of stones stood in the sand, upright, a line carved. The layout wasn't random. The positions of the stones correspond to the summer solstice and ancient star constellations. It's one of the oldest known astronomical observatories on Earth, built not by farmers fumbling in the dark, but by people who watch the sky, who track time, who organize themselves not just around survival, but around understanding. There are no monuments in the Green Sahara, no ziggurats, no obelisks, nothing that screams empire. But maybe they didn't want to leave monuments. Maybe they left something else, because as the rains began to disappear, slowly, decade by decade, the lakes dried up. The trees thinned. The grass faded. And these people had a choice, stay and die, or move. And so they moved eastward, to the Nile. The timing matches almost too perfectly. The earliest settlements in the Nile Valley appeared just as the Green Sahara begins to vanish. And those early Egyptians, they worshipped cattle. They tracked the stars. They buried their dead with care and ceremony. They built a civilization from memory, from the memory of the garden they lost. Which means Egypt may not have been born from chaos, as some assume. It may have been built by refugees from paradise. And if that's true, then the Green Sahara wasn't a prelude. It was the beginning. Its people didn't disappear. They evolved. They carried their knowledge of the stars, their reverence for water, their relationship with the land, and they poured it into the Nile like an offering. Over time, that knowledge sharpened. Cities grew. Kings rose. And pyramids pierced the sky. But the desert remembers. Even now, under satellite scans, hidden structures appear. Long lines of stone. Faint outlines of villages. Straight roads that lead nowhere, buried under sand so deep and ancient, it seems impossible that life could have once existed there. But it did. Some archaeologists believe we've barely scratched the surface, that beneath the dunes lies an entire chapter of human history, a kingdom without kings, a civilization without a name, a people who learned to build not for glory, but for harmony. There are no myths of war, no evidence of mass violence, only patterns, balance, silence. One burial site revealed a row of aligned graves, each spaced exactly the same distance apart, heads turned to the west. There were no weapons, no treasures, just bones, beads, and pottery, as if their focus was not on what they left behind, but on where they were going. Even their art reflects it. The rock carvings at Tassili Najer in Algeria show scenes not of conquest, but of life swimming, herding, dancing, even wearing what appear to be ceremonial masks. One image shows a line of figures holding hands walking toward a curved horizon. And then the art stops. As the desert took over, the carvings ended, not erased, just finished. We may never know their names. We may never understand their full mythology, their rituals, or how they viewed the world. But we know they were there. The desert forgot them, but the stones did not. Today, when you walk across the dunes of Libya or Mali, you might stumble on a shard of pottery polished by time but still intact, a memory in clay, or a stone aligned perfectly with the sun. And in those quiet moments, when the wind dies and the sand stops shifting, you can almost hear them, not in words, but in rhythm, a whisper beneath the dunes, a reminder before the gods of Egypt, before the towers of Mesopotamia, there was a garden in the desert, and the people who called it home looked up at the same stars we do, only they remembered them differently, because they saw them before the desert came. In the shadowy limestone mountains of southwestern China, where mist winds its way through narrow gorges and the forest floor remains perpetually damp, there are caves. Hundreds of them. Some barely big enough to crawl into, others vast enough to swallow cathedrals. To the locals, they're simply part of the land shelters from the rain hiding places for animals or homes for the odd hermit. But archaeologists who've studied these places call them something else. The fire caves, the name doesn't come from myth. It comes from the layers of charcoal. Deep inside these caves, some hundreds of feet from the nearest daylight, there are soot marks. Thick black stains rising toward the ceilings. Layers of ash buried beneath rock falls. And signs of fire. Thousands of fires burned in the same spots over and over for thousands of years. The first assumption was simple people lived here, but that's where the simplicity ends. Because these fires weren't continuous, the ash layers are interrupted sometimes by centuries. Entire bands of history missing, as if the caves were suddenly abandoned and then reoccupied generations later by people with different tools, different methods, and different bones. That's what caught the attention of researchers. The bones. In the deepest layers, those untouched for over 10,000 years, they found remains. Human-like, but not human. Not quite. The skulls were rounder, the jaws more pronounced, the teeth more worn but evenly, the overall shape, almost modern, but off. Just enough to make scientists hesitate. The people who lived here, who lit the earliest fires, weren't Homo sapiens, but they weren't quite Neanderthals either. Something in between, a cousin, a branch of the human tree we forgot, or perhaps never even knew. And they were careful. The bones weren't scattered or broken by animals. They were arranged. Some laid in simple circles, others placed beside the fire pits with stone tools nearby. There were no carvings, no walls, no paintings, just the faint suggestion of pattern, and always fire, not just for cooking, not just for heat, for something else. In every chamber, the soot climbed high. The ceilings are darkened evenly, not like the random blackening of accidental smoke. This was deliberate, as if these people used fire to mark space to define where they were. Some researchers suggest it was ritual, a form of memory. You light a fire in the same place as your ancestors, and you keep their presence burning. That's not the only mystery. The stone tools found with the older remains don't match those of known regional cultures. The shapes are unique, flaked with an unfamiliar technique, oddly balanced as if designed for a grip we don't quite understand. A few are too small for adult hands. Others seem weighted for throwing, but not at game animals. The angles are strange, almost ceremonial, and then suddenly they vanish, not one at a time, not slowly. In the ash layers, dated to roughly 8000 BCE, the evidence just stops. The fires go out, the bones disappear, the tools vanish, and above that layer, silence, centuries of empty strata. Then new occupants arrive. This time, clearly Homo sapiens, with pottery, with advanced flaking techniques, with signs of agriculture. But they never lived deep in the caves, just at the mouths, as if something kept them from going farther in, as if they felt something there they didn't want to disturb. Even today, locals avoid the deepest chambers, not because of superstition, but because the air is strange. Heavy, one man said, thick like breath someone forgot to finish. In the early 2000s, a joint Chinese-European team returned to the caves with modern instruments. They scanned the walls for hidden pigment. Nothing. They tested the air for trace gases. Still nothing. But several of the researchers reported intense dreams while camped near the inner cave entrances. Dreams of light, not firelight, something colder, pulsing, moving in rhythmic bursts like breath or heartbeat just at the edge of visibility. Some dismissed it as cave fatigue, claustrophobia, but others remembered something else. The fire patterns. Every ancient hearth in the cave follows a pattern, a repeating placement, left of the chamber entrance, 3 meters in, centered between 2 smooth walls, over and over, like they were lighting the fire for someone else to see or to arrive. And maybe that's the unsettling truth. What if the fire wasn't just for heat? What if it was an invitation, or worse, a beacon? Some anthropologists speculate that these early people may have held beliefs around fire that we no longer understand. That it wasn't just warmth, it was communication, a way to connect not only with each other, but with something beyond. A flame in the dark that meant we are here. We remember you. Come back. There's a moment in one of the smaller side chambers where you can still see the last fire pit. It's undisturbed. The ash packed tight with age. A few cracked stones around it. Nothing grand, just remnants. But when you stand there alone and turn off your light, the darkness presses in, not with fear, but with a strange kind of expectation. Like the cave is waiting for the fire to be lit again. Like the silence is temporary, and something beneath the ash is listening, waiting for the light to return. The desert of Arabia stretches endlessly vast and golden under a sun that seems to never blink. It's the kind of place where most people assume life ends, where the sand devours the wind erases and the past is swallowed whole. But buried in this seemingly lifeless expanse are lines. Long, deliberate, unbroken lines of stone that run across the earth for miles. They don't form buildings or fortresses. They don't mark borders or boundaries. They are walls, but they don't enclose anything. They don't guard. They don't divide. They just go. And the strangest part, they lead nowhere. Welcome to the mystery of the water walls of Arabia, discovered through a combination of satellite imagery and aerial surveys. These low stone structures were first written off as animal enclosures, maybe corrals for ancient herders or pens for livestock. That's what researchers assumed at first, but then they looked closer. These walls are far too long and too consistent to serve as animal fences. Some stretch over 10 kilometers in straight lines. Others curve gently through hills and basins. Their stones are neatly stacked too uniform to be natural formations, and they show signs of erosion not recent, but deep ancient weathering, suggesting they were laid thousands of years ago. Then came the real puzzle. There's no settlement near them, no roads, no tools, no pottery, no bones, just walls running through the emptiness. Some connect at sharp angles, others run parallel before suddenly disappearing beneath dunes. But all of them share one unique trait: they follow the contours of the land, like they were built to guide something that once flowed. Not animals, water. You see, thousands of years ago, Arabia wasn't like this. Satellite imaging core soil samples and ancient pollen records all tell the same story. This desert was once green. Rain fell, rivers ran, lakes shimmered under a cooler sky. And people lived here, not nomads scraping survival, but cultures that planned, built, and thrived. And the walls may have been their irrigation system, a lost network of hydrology, not aqueducts like Rome, not canals like Mesopotamia, something else. Something designed not to move water quickly, but to guide it, slow it, redirect it, store it during floods, and preserve it through dry seasons. Some walls form long, narrow corridors between them. When rain did fall, and occasionally still does, water follows these paths with uncanny precision, like a river remembering its bed. In modern flash floods, researchers have observed water snaking through these corridors as if pulled by memory. It's almost as if the walls are still working, still waiting, still doing the job they were built for. But who built them? That's where the mystery deepens. There's no consensus, no inscriptions, no relics, no named civilization has ever claimed these constructions. The walls predate most known Arabian cultures. Some theories suggest a prehistoric pastoral people. Others propose a proto-civilization that predates the rise of the kingdoms of Saba and Himyar. Then there are the legends. The Quran speaks of a people called Ad, mighty proud and powerful. A civilization so advanced and wealthy they dared challenge heaven. Their punishment? They were buried beneath a storm of sand. Many believe these walls are the bones of that story, a ruined infrastructure left behind by a vanished kingdom. The Quran isn't the only source. Arabian oral tradition speaks of cities made of stone, swallowed by storms of gardens hidden beneath dunes. And it's always the same theme: people who had water. Too much water. And then none. One theory even suggests that the walls weren't just practical, they were sacred. That they weren't just moving water, but worshiping it. That in a land where life and death hinged on rain, these structures were not just engineering, they were offerings. Sacred veins laid into the earth. And now, thousands of years later, the bones of that faith remain. The structures are hard to study up close. The desert isn't forgiving. Sandstorms shift the landscape. Heat damages equipment. Even drones sometimes falter in the dense winds, and yet the walls persist. They peek out from beneath dunes like memories. Some stand only knee-high, others buried to the top. Archaeologists have tried to clear them, only to have the sand return days later, as if the desert itself prefers them hidden. But the real question isn't what they were, it's what they're still doing. Because some of them are guiding water now. In satellite footage taken during rare rains, water moves along these ancient paths as if pulled by design. Not random puddling, not chaos. Flow, direction. Like the land remembers how to drink, and that raises the idea that maybe these structures weren't abandoned. Maybe they were left behind intentionally, preserved, not as ruins, but as instructions, a blueprint for surviving a dry future, a future like now. Because as climate change tightens its grip on the planet, researchers are beginning to reconsider these old stones. Maybe they aren't just history. Maybe they're solutions. Perhaps the people who built them weren't lost, but ahead of us, waiting for us to realize that the answers aren't in our satellites or computers. They're in the sand, where water once ran, where walls still wait, and where, if you listen closely, when the wind dies, you can hear the faintest trickle. Not real water, memory. And maybe if we follow it, we'll find more than just forgotten architecture. Maybe we'll find the wisdom of a people who knew how to build for eternity. The mist comes early in the northern highlands of Vietnam. It rolls down the hills before the sun even thinks about rising, curling around the trees like smoke with nowhere else to go. Everything here, stone, leaf, skin, feels damp by default. Even silence has weight, and tucked beneath a dense canopy, hidden on the sloped back of a forgotten hill, there's a ruin that refuses to introduce itself. No sign, no name, no path. The locals don't go there. They say it doesn't want to be found, but if you do find it, if you fight the vines and the fog, the sudden slips in your memory that make you forget why you're climbing in the first place, you'll come upon a fractured temple. The stones are black with age, soft-edged with moss. Cracks run like veins through collapsed roofs. Trees have pushed through walls like they were always meant to be part of the structure. You might walk right past it, mistaking it for another rock fall, unless you notice the wall. One wall, perfectly smooth, rising 10 feet flat as polished slate, and colder to the touch than the air around it. It faces east toward the sun it rarely sees. And when the fog thickens, when the morning is just the right kind of quiet, that wall begins to show something. Not a carving, not a painting, a mural that only appears in the mist. It starts faint, just shadows, like something trying to push through the stone. Then it blooms colors so soft and deep, they feel like they're being remembered rather than seen. Figures, symbols, scenes that shift as you watch. No two people see the same thing. One archaeologist swore she saw a man with 4 arms holding a burning tree. A week later, a monk described a circle of women in veils, eyes closed, standing around a sphere that shimmered like gold. A hiker from Da Nang saw animals, tigers with too many eyes, birds with horns and shapes that didn't look like anything that's ever walked this earth. One constant remains in every sighting: a dome, floating, glowing, never fully revealed. It hovers at the center of the mural like a forgotten sun. When the mist fades, so does the mural, completely. No pigment, no engraving, no residue, just smooth cold stone, again slick with dew. Scientists have tried everything: thermal imaging, chemical analysis, scraping tiny samples from the wall's surface. Nothing. It's not painted. It's not physical. It just happens. A few researchers believe it's a biological phenomenon, a kind of microfungi or humidity-reactive algae that responds to atmospheric pressure and light refraction. But no one can reproduce it. And no one has identified any living organism on the wall. It's as if the mural isn't there until it is. Some say it's a trick of the brain, that people want to see patterns, so they project meaning onto mist and moisture. But that doesn't explain why they all describe different scenes, and all in vivid, disturbing detail, or why, when they sketch what they saw from memory, the mural changes the next time they return. Yes, changes. This isn't static art. It moves. It evolves. And sometimes it responds. One researcher and artist from Ho Chi Minh City camped near the temple for 7 days straight, Each morning, he rose with the fog and watched the mural. He drew what he saw. Day 1, 5 figures with spears standing at the edge of a spiral. Day 2, the same figures, no spears, heads bowed. Day 3, only 4 remained. 1 was missing. Day 4, a new figure had appeared, taller, wrapped in cloth, watching the others. Day 5, the figures knelt. The spiral was larger. He left after the 6th day and never published his sketches. But he told a colleague the mural had noticed him. How does a wall notice you? Another account tells of a woman who approached too close. She claimed that the central figure in the mural, whatever it was, opened its eyes when she was just a few feet away. She fainted. When she came to the mural was gone, and she refused to return to the site. Local villagers have their own name for the place, though it's spoken softly and only in the older dialects. Buktuongho, the remembering wall. They don't call it cursed, but they say it's aware, not alive. Just aware. Some believe the mural is a kind of recording, like prehistoric film. That it doesn't depict something imaginary, but something that happened. A celestial event. A myth. A warning. The dome in the center may be a star, or a ship, or something older. Something no longer present. Or maybe it's not showing the past. Maybe it's showing the future. A few fringe theorists believe the mural isn't an illusion, but a transmission. That the wall is somehow receiving images sent through time or memory or dimensions we haven't mapped yet. That the fog acts like a lens, or a password, or a veil. You can't take a picture of it. People have tried. Cameras don't work. The images come out blank. Or worse, distorted beyond recognition. One photo, when enhanced digitally, showed a shape in the mist that looked like a face, but no one remembers seeing a face. It's as if the wall edits your memory, not erases, rewrites. And when you leave, you're not sure if what you saw ever existed at all. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the mural only exists when it's watched. Maybe the temple isn't forgotten, it's choosing silence, choosing who gets to see. And if that's true, then the question isn't what the mural is, it's who it's waiting for. And what happens when they finally arrive. In the parched lands of Turkmenistan, where wind carves the hills into ancient size, and the dust carries more memory than moisture, there is a place that doesn't appear on maps. No paved road leads to it. No signs guide the way. From a distance, it looks like any other patch of barren terrain. Dry ridges, cracked stone, the occasional thorn bush clinging to life. But as you step closer, shapes begin to emerge. Stone mounds, low square enclosures, circular domes crumbling under the weight of time. And then you realize what you're looking at. Tombs, hundreds of them. The locals call it the land of 100 tombs, though the number is far too modest. There are easily double, perhaps triple, that amount spread across the landscape like silent sentinels. Some are tightly clustered, others isolated, positioned with almost meditative space between them. They rise and fall like the breath of the land itself, ancient stone woven into desert rhythm. But it's what sits between the tombs that defies explanation. Ruins, faint outlines of homes, crumbled walls, door frames still standing against the wind. A dry well, long choked with sand, still marks the center of what once might have been a courtyard. This wasn't just a cemetery. It was a town built within the tombs, not beside them, among them. Archaeologists were puzzled when the site was first surveyed. Cities don't grow up inside graveyards. Ancient communities usually place their dead beyond the walls, on hills, across rivers, anywhere that kept the living and the departed respectfully apart. But here it's the opposite. The homes were constructed after the tombs, and they didn't try to hide it. Rooms were built right beside burial chambers. In some places, a home's exterior wall shares a foundation with a tomb. One house had a window that looked directly into a raised mausoleum. This wasn't avoidance, it was coexistence. The living made their lives among the dead. But why? Some believe this was a holy site, a place of pilgrimage where people came to live near the resting places of saints, shamans, or ancestors. Others suggest a nomadic culture that returned to the same ground generation after generation, gradually building their homes atop the memories of their kin. But the architecture raises more questions. These weren't temporary shelters. The stonework is thick, purposeful. Some walls are over a meter wide. The floors show signs of wear. Routines lived, not just visited. Wells were dug deep and lined with brick, indicating long-term habitation. People didn't pass through here. They stayed. And yet, there are no records of this place in Turkmen folklore. No legends, no warnings, just silence. In the oldest part of the site, near the center of the tomb, cluster stands a circular structure larger than the others. 8 stone pillars rise around its perimeter. The roof has collapsed, but fragments remain, suggesting a once domed ceiling. Inside were 5 skeletons, all children, laid in a circle, heads facing outward, hands folded neatly on their chests. There were no signs of illness, no injuries, no indicators of sacrifice, just stillness, deliberate placement, as if they were not buried in grief, but in ritual. No other tomb at the site matches this pattern. This isn't the only oddity. Some of the tombs show inscriptions, simple geometric carvings that don't match known Turkmen symbology. One displays a grid of triangles etched into the capstone. Another features a spiral not unlike those found in petroglyphs thousands of miles away in Ireland and North Africa. One theory suggests that many different cultures visited and reused this sacred ground, that it was a kind of spiritual crossroads, a necropolis shared over generations where belief systems blended and evolved. But again, if this were the case, we'd expect signs of trade diversity in artifacts, a layering of history. What we find instead is unity. The styles change slightly across the site, but the materials, layout, and spiritual care remain remarkably consistent. It's as if all the cultures that passed through this place agreed on a single unspoken truth. This land belonged to the dead and to the memory of the dead. And so they built their lives around that memory. It's unsettling to walk through it. You can still follow some of the streets, just low stones now tracing paths that wind between tombs. You pass through doorways and step into rooms where the floor dips just enough to suggest someone once sat there, slept there, cooked there, and then at night, perhaps stepped outside and sat beside the grave of a mother, a brother, a child. No fear, just closeness. Some researchers believe this closeness reflects a culture that didn't fear death, that saw the dead not as gone, but as still present, watching, protecting, even guiding. Maybe they thought death was less a boundary and more a direction, a way forward. And then they left, not all at once. There's no sign of fire, no massacre, no sudden collapse, just abandonment. Like a long exhale, the homes crumbled slowly, roofs fell in, wells dried, sand returned, and the tombs remained, still orderly, still untouched, still watching. Local herders who passed through the area refused to sleep near the ruins. They don't call it cursed, just not a place for the living. Some say they've heard names whispered on the wind, names they don't recognize. Others report that the sand seems to shift more quickly here, as if uncovering and recovering the tombs at will. One man claimed he saw a tomb appear overnight, emerging from the sand fully formed. He never went back. No full excavation has been completed. Funding is scarce. The area is remote. Interest is at best quiet. Perhaps that's for the best, because some places are not lost by accident. They are allowed to fade, not to be forgotten, but to be left in peace. And here in the land of 100 tombs, the silence is not empty. It's earned deep in the dense, sweat-soaked jungles of northern Cambodia. The trees are older than cities, and the roots are thicker than roads. The leaves above catch the sun in fractured fragments, and the ground below is always damp, always dark. But beneath this lush curtain hidden under centuries of foliage and silence lies a city. A vanished city, one you won't find in history books. They call it Mahendra Parvata, though even that name feels too precise for something so elusive. The Khmer Empire is known for Angkor Wat, majestic, symmetrical, timeless. But Mahendra Parvata was older, wilder, a prototype maybe, a spiritual twin. And for centuries it was almost entirely forgotten. No one knew it was there until satellites told us. In 2012, researchers using airborne LiDAR laser-based mapping technology capable of seeing through the tree canopy sent pulses down over the Cambodian highlands. What came back was astonishing. A full city, grids of roads, terraces, water channels, an entire landscape engineered and organized, hidden beneath centuries of jungle. It wasn't a scattering of settlements. It was urban planning on a massive scale. More than 40 square miles of mapped infrastructure. But when archaeologists came on foot, machetes and hand sweat beating on their brows, they found nothing. No temples, no towering monuments, no inscriptions, just mounds, platforms, roads with no wheels, canals filled with roots. The jungle had reclaimed the city completely, yet left the bones intact. It was as if the earth had tried to forget, but couldn't quite manage to erase everything. So who lived here? Mahendra Parvata is believed to be one of the first capitals of the Khmer Empire, possibly founded in the 8th or 9th century CE. The kings who ruled it were real, but what they built here feels unreal. The city sits atop a mountain plateau, high above the plains where Angkor would later rise. It wasn't practical. It wasn't defensible. But it was spiritual. They built in stone and earth, reservoirs, sluices, water channels that redirected entire monsoon flows. It's not just the scale, it's the thought behind it. These people engineered a landscape. They carved order into jungle chaos. And then they walked away. There's no record of war, no burn layers, no mass graves, just absence. One theory suggests the city failed due to poor water management. Ironically, for a people who engineered water like it was silk, the soil on the plateau was too thin. Farming may have failed. The people moved to more fertile ground. Angkor rose, Mahendra Parvata faded, but not entirely. Some of the stone platforms are still perfectly level. Even buried under centuries of roots and rain, the angles remain sharp. Some of the canals still guide water after a good rain, just like they did 1,000 years ago. One researcher described it as a machine that still works, even though no one's around to push the buttons. And that's the strange part. There are no carvings, no gods etched into the walls, no epic stories chiseled into stone, no list of kings, no declarations of power. It's like they built a city without ego, Or maybe they didn't expect anyone else to find it. It's hard to imagine now, standing in the heat and humidity, the buzz of insects all around, that this place was once full of voices. Markets, families, priests in saffron robes chanting beneath open-air shrines. Children playing along terraces that are now buried under vines. But the grid is still there. The roads lead in straight lines through places no vehicle has ever passed. The water channels loop and bend with purpose. In the wet season, they carry runoff from the hills down into a still working reservoir. That's the word that keeps coming back working. Because Mahendra Parvata doesn't feel dead. It feels dormant. Some believe it was never meant to be a city in the traditional sense. That it wasn't about living, trading, conquering. It was a place of transition, a spiritual station, a city built for ceremony, not commerce, a threshold. Perhaps the people who lived here didn't abandon it because it failed, but because it served its purpose, like a pilgrimage that ends when the lesson is learned. Others believe Mahendra Parvata was a testing ground, a grand experiment before the construction of Angkor. That its engineers and priests learned what worked here, what didn't, and moved on to build something greater. But Angkor was built in the open. Mahendra Parvata was hidden. Some say that difference matters. A few modern monks still make pilgrimage to the area, not to worship, just to sit, to listen. One was asked why he returned to a place with no temple, no statue, no shrine. He smiled and said, "The city remembers itself, and maybe it does, because there's something undeniably strange about how the jungle holds this place. It grows over everything, but never quite through it. The trees bend around old walls. The vines creep up, but never shatter. It's as if the forest has made peace with the stone, as if it respects it." One archaeologist reported that their GPS failed the moment they crossed into the core of the city grid. Not just signal interference. Their compass spun. Their backup battery drained. A team member grew dizzy and had to leave. No explanation was found. When they returned the next day, the clearing they'd worked in looked slightly different. Not wildly, just enough. Enough to make them wonder if they'd ever been there at all. They found their tools exactly where they left them, but the footprints were gone, covered in dry leaves, and the air smelled faintly not of decay or moss, but of incense. No one had burned any, at least not anyone from their team. So maybe Mahendra Parvata isn't just an abandoned city. Maybe it's a memory, practicing how to be a place again. Maybe it's waiting for someone who understands what it was built for. And maybe, in some quiet, forgotten way, it never really stopped breathing. In the southern reaches of Africa, where the Limpopo and Shash rivers once carved graceful arcs across the land, there's a plateau that looks at first glance like any other stretch of sun-baked brush. Scrubby hills, dry winds, red soil dotted with acacia trees. But hidden atop one of those hills is a kingdom, not a myth, not a legend. A real royal capital abandoned long before it was ever known to the world. This is Mapungubwe, centuries before Europeans set foot in southern Africa. Before Zimbabwe's great stone towers rose, there was a people who built a city on this hill, small in footprint, but immense in meaning. And what they left behind wasn't an empire carved in stone. It was something more intimate, something golden. The site wasn't uncovered until the 1930s. At the time, colonial administrators were exploring the area for mining prospects. What they found instead were graves. Not shallow holes in the earth, but carefully constructed stone burial chambers hidden in the upper terraces of Mapungubwe Hill. Inside those graves were the remains of royals, but they weren't buried flat as most kings might be. They were seated upright, as if still watching over the land. Wrapped in cloth surrounded by offerings, beads, bangles, and one very particular object, a small rhinoceros carved entirely from gold sheet and wood. It was exquisite, fragile, impossibly well preserved, and more than that, it was symbolic. The golden rhino became the emblem of Mapungubwe. It spoke of wealth, of artisanship, of belief. A totem of power, perhaps, or protection. No one really knows, but here's what we do know. Mapungubwe thrived. From around 1075 to 1220 CE, this kingdom was a vibrant hub of trade. It stood at the crossroads of routes that stretched across the continent and beyond. Glass beads from India, porcelain from China, Islamic ceramics. Gold flowed from its hills into waiting hands, and in return came exotic goods knowledge and culture. Yet the people of Mapungubwe left little behind in the way of grand architecture. No massive temples, no towering walls. The elite lived on the hilltop, separated from the commoners who lived below. The division was social symbolic, but not severe. The power here was quiet, rooted in ritual, not conquest. And then just as quietly, the kingdom vanished. Around the early 13th century, Mapungubwe was abandoned. No record of war. No traces of fire or destruction. No dramatic collapse, just silence, like a kingdom that exhaled and let itself be forgotten. Some believe a shift in climate was to blame. The rivers may have dried, rainfall patterns changed, agriculture would have suffered. Others suggest that internal succession disputes fractured the leadership, prompting a move northward to what would become Great Zimbabwe. But even in absence, the hill remembers. Its summit remains sacred, protected. No one climbs it casually. Archaeologists have tread lightly, and today tourists are not allowed on its highest points. Not because of danger, but because the site demands reverence. The burial chambers remain. Seated bones still watch the land. Gold still glitters in museum cases, far from its resting place, but the memory of its weight is heavier on the hill itself. Below the summit, researchers found hundreds of stone circles. Some are large enough to have been homes. Others are small, too narrow for human use. And here's where the mystery deepens. Some of the circles align with solar events, the solstice equinox. Others appear to mark star positions specific to the night sky during the kingdom's peak. It raises a question. Were these just homes, or were they instruments, calendars, prayers in stone? There's little written record to guide us. The people of Mapungubwe did not leave books. What survives is material pottery with distinctive patterns, metalwork of surprising sophistication, and the spatial order of a society that understood balance. Because balance is at the heart of Mapungubwe, the separation of the living and the dead, of rulers and ruled, of sacred and mundane. It wasn't a division of fear, it was a separation of purpose. The royal hill was elevated not just physically, but spiritually. The king ruled from above, not in dominance, but in ritual alignment. The burial in the seated position may have been more than symbolism. It may have been about continuity. The king didn't just lead in life, he observed in death. That kind of thinking is rare. It suggests a worldview not based on human supremacy, but on cycle, on repetition, on harmony with forces beyond sight. And that brings us back to the gold. Because gold in Mapungubwe wasn't just wealth, it was memory. It adorned the dead. It wasn't minted into currency. It wasn't scattered in conquest. It was shaped into animals, discs, beads, placed carefully, hidden, protected meant not to be spent, but to speak. The rhinoceros, small, fierce, enduring, wasn't just art. It was a message, a declaration in metal. We were here, we lived, we ruled with care, and we left in silence. Today, standing at the base of Mapungubwe Hill, you can feel the pressure of that silence. Not oppressive, not haunted, just intentional, like the kingdom knew it would one day become invisible, and was fine with that. Because legacy isn't always carved in walls. Sometimes it's left in alignments, in gold buried under skin, in circles of stone that still hold their shape, even after the wind has stripped the names away. Mapungubwe may not have had a written language, but it knew how to write in shadow. And we're only just beginning to learn how to read it. You stand at the mouth of a narrow valley in the remote highlands of Kyrgyzstan. The air is thin here, not just from elevation, but from age, like time itself has slowed down to match the pace of the wind. There are no villages nearby, no signs, no cell reception, just cliff silence and something waiting just out of sight. The locals call it the Valley of the Sealed Steppes. It doesn't appear on any hiking maps. Even satellite imagery has trouble capturing its true shape. But those who've been there, mostly herders and a handful of researchers, speak of one strange thing carved into the stone. A staircase, 39 steps precisely, cut directly into the side of a massive rock wall, rising at a gentle incline, then ending abruptly at a smooth vertical face of untouched mountain. No platform, no landing, just a blank cliff at the top. The steps are ancient. That much is clear. Weathered and worn, but still sharp-edged enough to hold shape. They aren't crude. They're symmetrical, purposeful. Whoever carved them wasn't in a hurry. This wasn't a desperate escape or a collapsed project. This was completed and then sealed. The dimensions are too exact to be natural. Each step is evenly spaced, slightly wider at the base and narrower at the top, as if leading towards something once perched above, but now long gone. Some say a temple once stood at the summit. Others believe the steps led to a ceremonial platform that crumbled away centuries ago. But the geology tells a different story. There are no signs of collapse, no rubble, no anchor points, no chisel marks around the upper face of the cliff. Just clean, undisturbed stone, as if the steps were carved into nothing, as if their destination never existed at all. Geologists have studied the area and confirmed what locals have always said: the steps are not a quirk of erosion. They were made. But what truly unnerves even the most skeptical is this: each step makes a different sound. When struck with a rock or staff, every tread emits a tone, subtle but distinct. The lower steps produce low, dull thuds. As you climb, the notes rise in pitch. By step 39, it's a high, sharp ring, like striking a crystal. One researcher recorded the sequence and played it back as a scale. It produced a strange, haunting melody, not quite musical, not random either, deliberate, almost like an instrument built into the mountain. Some believe it was a form of communication, coded prayers perhaps, a ritual of ascent. You climb, striking each step as you go, offering a song to something that once stood at the top. Others believe it was a lock, that the steps were meant to be played in a certain order, that the melody, if correct, would reveal something: a door, a chamber, a change. That theory grew louder after a visiting ethnomusicologist noticed something peculiar when she played the sequence in reverse step 39 to step 1. Her equipment shorted out, not permanently, just for a few seconds, enough for the lights to flicker and her audio recorder to stutter, leaving behind a low hum that didn't match anything in her environment. She left the next day and never returned. Then there's the legend. Not ancient, not carved in stone, just an old herdsman's story. He said the steps were built for someone who never came. That long ago, how long he didn't say the valley was a gathering place. People came with gifts, songs, offerings. They built the steps he claimed not to reach something above, but to prepare for something descending. Not a god, not a king, something else, something that never arrived. So the builders left, but they didn't dismantle the staircase. They sealed it, not with stones or curses, but with absence. That's the part that chills you as you stand at the foot of the climb. This staircase wasn't abandoned. It was closed, and yet the steps remain. Open, unbroken, daring you to walk them. And people have tried, but something strange happens when they do. One man climbed to the top and reported feeling as though the air got heavy. He said it was like walking through water by the last few steps. Another said the sky looked too close, as if the clouds were pressing downward, folding in on the valley like a lid. Several report headaches, nausea, a buzzing in the chest, not from exertion, but from something internal, like a dissonant chord being struck just below the heart. And the sounds, always the sounds. Even if you don't strike the steps, you hear them, faint notes echoing just behind your breath, as if the stones remember being played. One researcher brought tuning forks to test the harmonic frequency of each tread. She found that the full staircase produced a harmonic scale rarely used in Western music, but one that appears in ancient Central Asian stringed instruments. That discovery led to an unsettling idea. The staircase is not just a path. It's a message, a phrase, or a name, spoken once long ago, and now carved into the land, waiting to be spoken again. At the base of the stairs, barely visible beneath lichen and dust, someone no one knows who once etched a line of script. It's not modern, not Kyrgyz, not Arabic. It's older. No one's ever translated it. But a linguist who studied the shape of the glyphs said they resembled vocalization markers like you'd find in music, or chanting, not language. He theorized the symbols might not be words, but instructions for pitch and rhythm, a song, a key, and the staircase is the instrument. All of this might be nothing, just stone, just noise. But then why does the ground around the steps vibrate? Only slightly, only at night. Some say they felt it through their boots, a slow pulse, not dangerous, not loud, just enough to suggest that something below the mountain is humming, like the valley isn't finished yet, like the sealed steps aren't really sealed at all, just waiting for the right note and the person brave or foolish enough to sing it. The wind-swept valleys of the Mongolian Altai stretch out like ancient memory-rolling hills, jagged cliffs, and endless skies. There's a silence here that doesn't feel empty. It feels alert, like the land is listening to itself. You hike through the tall grasses, expecting nothing but windburn and dust, and then suddenly you see them. Stones, dozens of them, not scattered, not natural, arranged, circles, lines, grids, some large enough to outline what could have been a house, others so small they seem meant for hands, not feet. Standing stones no taller than your waist, rising from the ground in the middle of nowhere. They call them hirigsurs, burial mounds, ringed by stone built by Bronze Age nomads more than 3,000 years ago. You might assume they're like any other ancient marker relics of a people who lived, died, and left their monuments behind. But these stones, they're still moving. Not quickly, not obviously, But if you compare photographs, maps, and notes taken across the last century, you'll find something disturbing. The stones have shifted, slowly, precisely, consistently. One researcher from the 1950s documented a cluster of 7 upright stones arranged in a straight line. In photos, taken 60 years later, the same stones are still standing, but the line is now a curve. The outer stones have rotated. The middle ones have crept slightly closer together, and the soil around them untouched. No signs of tampering, no erosion that could explain the rotation, no landslides, just movement. Another cluster, known informally as the Square Village, consists of 4 large cornerstones and a few smaller interior markers. In the oldest survey maps, the square is a perfect box. In the most recent scans, the corners have moved inward toward the center. As if the structure is contracting, you might dismiss this as bad record keeping. Old maps weren't always accurate after all. But then there's the data from LiDAR and drone scans. Precise, repeatable, confirmed. The stones are moving, and not randomly. They're forming new shapes. One particularly unsettling sight shows what appears to be a procession, a crescent-shaped line of stones leading toward a central monolith. In images from 1987, the crescent is wide open, gentle. In satellite images from 2020, it is narrowed, tighter, more focused, as if the stones are gathering. You'd think someone was manipulating them, but cameras have been placed, motion sensors, nothing. The stones move only when no one is watching, and never more than a few centimeters at a time. A few geologists have proposed magnetic anomalies. The region is known for its ferrous rock content after all. Maybe over centuries, slow shifts in the Earth's magnetic field are exerting subtle pressure on the mineral-rich stones. But that doesn't explain direction. It doesn't explain why these movements form recognizable patterns. It doesn't explain why in one site, a triangle of stones widened to become a perfect equilateral shape between 2002 and 2017. Someone or something is rearranging them, or they're rearranging themselves. The local herders have a word for the region, Namaguyil. It means the listening hills. They don't camp near the stone circles, not because of spirits, but because they say the land remembers. That if you walk into one of the villages at dusk, you'll feel something watching, not with eyes, but with weight. A few even say the stones whisper, not in language, just sound, a deep vibrating hum just beneath the threshold of hearing. More than one researcher has returned from the field complaining of tinnitus that lasted for weeks. Others reported vivid dreams, people standing still in the mist, stone-faced arms, extended as if holding positions in a dance only they understood. One man wrote in his notes, "It's not that these were villages that once moved, it's that they never stopped." Some believe the Kyrgyzstan are aligned with celestial bodies, that the stones mark solstices, star patterns, even lunar cycles. But if that's true, then they're correcting themselves. Several formations, once misaligned due to tectonic drift, now sit more precisely aligned with current solar data than they did a century ago. The stones are keeping up with the sky. How? No one knows. Another unsettling detail: new stones appear. Yes, appear. Expeditions have reported returning to familiar sites only to find an extra stone. Just one. Not a recent break. Not a fallen piece. A new marker, buried at the base firm in the ground as if it had been there for years. But it hadn't. No one saw it arrive. It wasn't in the records. One archaeologist, Dr. Tungalag Bayatar, documented a particularly well-preserved ring of stones and returned 2 months later to find that 2 had moved inward by 6 inches. A third had turned 90 degrees. She wrote in her journal, "I don't think we're studying ruins. I think we're being studied back." The idea sounds absurd. Stone can't move on its own. It can't choose. And yet, it's happening, not dramatically, not with fanfare, just slow, steady shifting. Like the stones are remembering where they were supposed to be, or anticipating where they need to be next. Some believe the formations are part of a larger message, an ongoing adjustment, a living map, a kind of quiet terrestrial clock. Every stone, every shift, a tick, a mark of time not measured in seconds or centuries, but in cycles. And when the pattern completes, no one knows. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. Until then, the stones remain, quiet, listening, and slowly, always slowly walking, far out in the Pacific Ocean, past where the tourist trails thin and the air starts to carry more salt than sound, lies the island of Pohnpei. At first glance, it's no different from any other lush Micronesian paradise: green hills, white beaches, thick jungles buzzing with life. But along the shallow coastline, half sunk into tidal waters and tangled mangroves, sits a city that should not exist. Nan Madol, the name translates to spaces between, and that's exactly what it feels like. A city built on a network of artificial islets, 92 of them, constructed atop coral reefs and basalt foundations. The ruins sprawl across the water like puzzle pieces rearranged by waves and time. But these aren't modest huts or fragile walls. They're megaliths, massive basalt columns, each weighing several tons, stacked like oversized Lincoln logs, forming towering walls and courtyards, canals, and crypts. And no one knows how they got there, because basalt doesn't float, and these stones weren't carved nearby. The closest quarry is several miles away, across dense forest, through swampy terrain, over rough water. And the islanders, back when Nan Madol was active, had no wheels, no pulleys, no cranes, no beasts of burden. Yet they moved stones heavier than elephants, and they built a city out of them. The layout is meticulous. Each islet has a function: living quarters, religious platforms, food storage, burial tombs. Canals wind between them like watery streets. It's Venice, if Venice were designed by silent engineers who thought in stone and ritual, not convenience. At the heart of Nan Madol lies Nandawas, the royal mortuary. Its walls are over 25 feet tall, built from basalt prisms so tightly stacked they've withstood centuries of typhoons and tidal surges. The interior still holds tombs, empty now, or perhaps simply unrecognizable. No writing, no inscriptions, just quiet whetstone and shadows. According to legend, the city was built by twin sorcerers, Olosopa and Olisihpa, who flew the stones into place using magic and chants. They arrived from a distant land, seeking a place to build a ceremonial center for worship and power. They chose the reef flats off Pohnpei's coast and began raising islets from the sea, stacking basalt into impossible structures. Folklore, sure, but how else do you explain 2,000 tons of basalt? Some researchers believe raft-based transport was used. Others argue for bamboo rollers, vast labor forces, months of painstaking trial and error. But none of it quite adds up. Not with this many stones. Not with this much precision. Not with this level of intent. You see, Nan Madol wasn't just a royal compound. It was a city without farmland. No crops. No livestock pens. No infrastructure to sustain the hundreds, possibly thousands of people who must have lived and worked here. Which means food had to be brought in daily, by canoe. From outside, that's not practical. That's not efficient. That's ceremonial. This wasn't about ease of living. It was about purpose. Nan Madol was built to separate, to set rulers, priests, and rituals apart from the world, the sacred from the mundane, the dead from the living. Some have compared it to ancient Thebes or Angkor Wat, but even those cities grew around their temples. Nan Madol was the temple. Everything within it whispers of control, of surveillance, of unseen power. One wall encloses a square basin lined with coral where fresh water wells up from underground. It's still drinkable today. Locals say the water tastes strange, not bad, just old. Like something that's been waiting for you to sip it. Another structure, partly submerged, contains a circular stone pit, once filled with giant sea eels. Sacred animals, fed by hand, spoken to. They were guardians, or messengers, or both. Locals still refuse to swim near that pit, not because of superstition, because sometimes they say the water bubbles, not from heat, from breath. Nan Madol's power faded in the 16th century when the ruling Sudler dynasty fell. The last of the kings was said to be cruel, demanding tributes of impossible size. When he was overthrown, the city was left to the tides. Nature returned. Mangroves crept through the canals. Roots split the stones. The sea slowly reclaimed what it had once carried, but it never fully erased it, and maybe it can't. In 2016, UNESCO designated Nan Madol a World Heritage Site, calling it the Venice of the Pacific. But that label feels small, too comfortable, because if you stand there, really stand there and listen, you realize something. This place was not made for comfort. It was made for ritual, the kind of ritual that lingers after the ceremony ends, the kind that rewrites the land. Divers exploring the outer perimeter have found stone alignments under the sea, walls and paths now completely submerged. Either the sea has risen, or Nan Madol was once part of something even larger and older. In fact, some believe it may be only the peak of a much older city, now lost to rising waters and geological shifts. A Pacific Atlantis, not a myth. A memory, still breathing, still watching, still unfinished. Because here's the final mystery. LiDAR scans from 2018 revealed a pattern to the layout of the islets, one that matches constellations visible from Pohnpei during the equinox 900 years ago. Stars as streets, as sacred geometry, and in the center, where the twin stars of Castor and Pollux would align, sits Nandawaz, the tomb, the heart. So maybe the sorcerers were real in a way. Maybe they weren't flying stones through the sky. Maybe they were pulling stars down to earth, and maybe they didn't fail. Maybe Nan Madol was never meant to last forever. Maybe it was meant to wait, for the stars to return, for the chant to resume, for the sea to part, and for someone to finally understand the message left behind, not in words, but in stone water and silence, on a windswept plateau in southeastern Turkey, where the ground is dry and cracked, and the hills rise in soft waves like sleeping beasts. Something impossible lies buried beneath the earth, and it has only just begun to wake up. Its name is Gobekli Tepe, and it rewrites everything we thought we knew about human history. You see, Gobekli Tepe is old, unimaginably old, built over 11,000 years ago, before the pyramids, before Stonehenge, before writing metal, or even the invention of the wheel, before the first known cities, before agriculture. And that's the part that shouldn't be true, because whoever built this place, they weren't farmers. They were hunter-gatherers, people without permanent homes. People who followed the herds, slept in tents, and lived by the rhythm of the land. But they came here, to this hill, and carved a temple into the stone, not a simple circle of rocks. Massive pillars up to 20 feet tall, carved from limestone and arranged in rings. Some weigh more than 10 tons. And they weren't just dragged into place. They were sculpted, smooth, shaped, detailed. Many of the pillars bear relief carvings: foxes, snakes, cranes, wild boars, scorpions, and not abstract symbols either. These are naturalistic, precise, alive. The kind of art that takes patience, time, and incredible skill. But where did that skill come from? How do nomads, people with no homes, no towns, no written language, build the first known temple on Earth? Archaeologists have no satisfying answer. The leading theory? They didn't just worship here, they changed here. That maybe it was Gobekli Tepe that inspired humans to settle down, not the other way around. Think about that. The first real buildings weren't homes. They were sacred. The first walls didn't protect people from invaders. They framed rituals. Gobekli Tepe might not be the result of civilization. It might be the reason civilization exists. And that changes everything. The carvings are rich with symbolism, but their meaning remains elusive. One pillar, known as Pillar 43, or the Vulture Stone, seems to depict celestial patterns including constellations and possibly even a comet impact. Some researchers argue that it records a real cosmic event, a memory frozen in stone, by people who didn't yet have cities, but who watched the sky like it was scripture. Another set of symbols shows a headless human birds and geometric lines converging. A warning, a myth, or a story we've forgotten how to read. Then there's the architecture. Each ring of pillars contains two taller central stones standing like gatekeepers surrounded by slightly shorter ones. They face each other like they're mid-conversation. Some believe they represent gods, others ancestors. Some even suggest the layout mimics the human body, shoulders, spine, arms, an early attempt to represent the self. And then comes the strangest part. The site was buried, not by time, not by erosion, by people. Intentionally, each enclosure was carefully filled in with rubble, dirt, and bones, as if the builders wanted to hide it, not destroy, preserve. Why? Maybe they feared what they'd built. Maybe they moved on, leaving it behind, like a sealed letter to the future. Or maybe Gobekli Tepe had served its purpose. A place of transformation, and once the transformation was complete, they turned the page. But the book was never lost. It just waited underground, buried beneath layers of history. The site was first discovered in the 1960s, but dismissed as a medieval cemetery. It wasn't until the 1990s that Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist, realized what he was looking at. Since then, only a fraction of Gobekli Tepe has been uncovered, less than 10%. There are still dozens of rings buried untouched, still silent, still waiting. Some researchers believe the site was part of a larger complex spread across a vast region. Other hills nearby show similar buried formations. If true, Gobekli Tepe might not have been unique. It might have been one of many. A network of sacred sites connected by stories and sky, a constellation in stone, and that would make sense, because the sky matters here. Every pillar was placed with care. Some align with solstices, others point towards specific stars. There's a sense of rhythm in the layout, a conversation between heaven and earth. One theory proposes that the builders were marking the precession of the equinoxes, a subtle wobble in the Earth's rotation that takes over 26,000 years to complete. How would they have known? We don't know. But maybe they didn't need charts. Maybe they just watched and remembered and carved what they saw. Gobekli Tepe raises more questions than it answers. Who built it? Why? Why bury it? Why here? Why then? And most haunting of all, what did they see? Some believe the site marks the moment humans first looked inward, not just to the stars, but to themselves. A shift in consciousness, a sacred experiment, the birth of belief, and maybe even the first whisper of civilization. Because this wasn't just a building, it was a statement, a declaration that we are more than flesh and hunger, that we gather not just for survival, but for meaning. And that even in the earliest days before writing, before empires, before memory itself, we were already looking for something greater. And somehow, we found it in stone, under sky. And now, millennia later, we dig through dirt and bone to hear that message again. And though the words are gone, the silence is clear. They were here. They built something beautiful. And then they left us to wonder. The Atacama Desert in northern Chile is dry in a way that almost feels personal, not just arid absolute. Some weather stations here have never recorded rainfall. The land is so sterile that scientists use it to simulate Mars. Bones don't decay here. Salt creeps up through the soil like ghost veins. You can walk for hours without seeing a single insect, a single bird, a single shadow that isn't your own. And then you see it. A line, then another, then hundreds. Massive, straight, geometrically perfect, etched into the desert crust by people who left no written history. This is the Pampa del Tamarugal, home to one of the world's most overlooked ancient enigmas, the Atacama geoglyphs. Unlike the famous Nazca lines of Peru, which are etched into flat desert plains, these geoglyphs climb hills. They follow terrain. They rise and fall with the contours of the earth, like they were made to be seen from the sky. And they weren't doodles. These are enormous. Some span over 100 meters. There are humanoid figures, animals, llamas, serpents, birds. There are geometric shapes, spirals, trapezoids, long arrows pointing nowhere and everywhere. Over 5,000 geoglyphs have been recorded so far, dating from 600 to 1 to 500 CE. But there's one that draws more questions than answers. The Atacama giant. It's the largest prehistoric anthropomorphic figure in the world. Hatsuri 19 meters tall, etched into the slope of Cerro Unitas Hill. With broad arms, round eyes, and what appears to be a headdress or antennae, it stares across the desert with blank authority. No one knows what it's meant to represent. Some say a god, others a shaman. Some fringe theorists whisper an alien, but set aside the conspiracy. What makes the Atacama giant so haunting isn't its size, it's its purpose. Some researchers believe it functioned as a calendar, that its crown-like markings align with lunar cycles, solstices, and eclipses. That the figure wasn't just a symbol, it was a tool. A cosmic clock drawn across a hill, tracking time, not in seconds, but in shadows. Because here's what happens. During specific times of the year, the sun casts precise shadows from the giant's features, falling onto the desert below, in ways that match lunar calendars used by pre-Incan civilizations. In other words, this figure might have told people when to plant, when to harvest, when to watch the sky. It wasn't art. It was astronomy, and it wasn't alone. Across the Atacama, these geoglyphs are always near ancient caravan routes. The desert may look lifeless now, but for centuries it was a vital trade corridor. Llamas carried goods, copper shell, obsidian from the Andes to the coast across hundreds of miles. And the geoglyphs, they guided them, marking trails, offering signs. Some are placed like waypoints. Others point towards sacred mountains or water sources long dried. One theory suggests the images were created not just to be seen from above, but to be walked ceremonially, that pilgrims trace the shapes with their own feet as an act of devotion or navigation. Some of the figures are made from dark volcanic stones arranged in the sand. Others are scraped into the surface, revealing the lighter soil beneath. They've lasted for over 1,000 years, not because they were hidden, but because this desert doesn't forget. No rain to wash them away, no vegetation to cover them, just sun-wind silence and intent, because these lines are not random. They don't sprawl in chaos. They follow rules, direction, alignment, and something else, connection. When mapped together, the geoglyphs form a vast, complex network. Not just markers, but a symbolic language. Some figures repeat always facing east. Others pair with animals. Some are clustered in trios, thought to represent stages of life or steps in a ritual. It's like someone tried to encode a worldview into the ground, a belief system in the form of geography. But here's the part that gets under your skin. Some of the lines are so fine, so faint, that they're nearly invisible at ground level. You'd need height to see the full picture. A hilltop, a drone, a balloon, or something higher. So why draw what you can't fully see? Who are they drawing for? The local Aymara descendants have their own stories. They speak of sky people, of mountain spirits, of knowledge passed down not in words, but in paths. The geoglyphs aren't pictures, they say. They're invitations. Memories left for the land to hold when mouths go silent. Archaeologists remain cautious, but even they agree something more was happening here. The figures weren't casual. They were sacred. The desert was a canvas, and time was the paint. One site, known as Chiza, features a series of arrows pointing to a long-buried spring. The water's gone now, but the geoglyphs remain. A map of a place that no longer exists, guiding no one, yet still waiting. And if you walk among them in the early morning, when the light is low and the heat hasn't yet risen, you'll hear it. Nothing. No birds. No buzzing. No breeze. Just the crunch of your own feet and the feeling that something is watching. Not malicious, just aware. Like the land itself is remembering a time when humans carved their beliefs into the dust, hoping that someone someday might come along and read them, not with words, but with wonder. Because that's what the Atacama geoglyphs are in the end. Not a puzzle to be solved, a gesture from people who had no books, only stars, only stone, only silence, and yet they told their story anyway, line by line, hill by hill, shadow by shadow, waiting for someone to look down from above and see that they were always there, in the heart of the Indian Ocean, far off the southeastern coast of India, where the water shifts from turquoise to ink and the monsoons blow salt into every crack of stone, lies a mystery hidden beneath the waves. Not a shipwreck, not a coral reef, but an entire city, sunken, silent, forgotten by time until a storm revealed it once again. Welcome to the lost city of Dwarka, mentioned in ancient Hindu texts as the opulent capital of Lord Krishna. Dwarka was said to be a place of gold and gardens where the gods walked among mortals and palaces sparkled like starlight. When Krishna left the world, legend says, the sea swallowed the city whole. For centuries, it was considered myth, no more real than Atlantis. But then, in the late 1980s and early 2000s, divers off the coast of Gujarat made a startling discovery. Ruins. Stone blocks arranged in grids, massive walls, staircases that led to nothing but water, and then in the sands around them, pottery shards, tools and anchors. Carbon dating put some of the artifacts at 9,000 years old. 9,000. That's older than the Egyptian pyramids, older than Mesopotamia, older than every known city on the planet. And yet here it was submerged beneath 100 feet of water, not jumbled, organized. Underwater archaeologists mapped out the site. Streets, courtyards, rectangular foundations, evidence of construction trade and religious practice. The ruins stretch across miles of seabed far larger than any isolated shipwreck could ever explain. And it wasn't the only one. Off the nearby Gulf of Combat sonar scans revealed another submerged city. Same pattern, same depth, same eerie precision. How do you explain that? Most of our models of history say that humans weren't building cities at this scale that early. We were still gathering berries, living in small tribes, figuring out how not to burn down our thatched huts. But if Dwarka was real, that means our ancestors knew more than we thought, built more than we imagined, and lost more than we've ever recovered. Of course not, everyone agrees. Some argue that the formations are natural sandstone ridges shaped by current and tide. But natural processes don't build right angles. They don't stack blocks or carve steps or scatter man-made pottery across the ocean floor. Others dismiss it as a local kingdom swallowed by sea level rise in the last 5,000 years. Coastal erosion, tectonic shifts, a tragedy, but not a miracle. Yet the Vedic texts are eerily specific. The Mahabharata and Skanda Purana describe a shining city with roads as smooth as mirrors and towers that touch the clouds. A city that glowed at night with lamps and celestial fire. And they describe its destruction. A massive flood, a divine departure, and the ocean claiming what once belonged to men and gods. Is it metaphor? Possibly. But why does the sonar match the story? Why does the seabed still whisper of roads? Why do the divers feel again and again that they are walking not through wreckage, but through memory? Some researchers believe ancient India may have witnessed an earlier chapter of civilization, one long, buried by water and myth, that humans once built cities on these coasts only to watch them vanish as the Ice Age ended and the ocean surged. In just a few thousand years, global sea levels rose over 400 feet. Vast tracts of habitable land vanished, and with them, our first experiments with cities, temples, language, astronomy. Dwarka may be one of those experiments, not the first city, but a survivor of a world we no longer remember. And that changes everything. Because if humans were building cities 9,000 years ago, then history isn't a line. It's a spiral, rising and falling. And every time we think we're the first to reach the mountaintop, we find ruins beneath our feet. A marine biologist once described diving at Dwarka as swimming through someone else's thoughts. The stones feel too placed, the steps too quiet, the silence too deliberate. Divers have found small conch bangles in the sand shaped by hands now dust. They've found fire altars, yes underwater, that match those described in the Vedas. Even the layout of certain ruins mirrors the sacred city grid still used in Hindu temple architecture today. It's as if the blueprint for Dwarka was passed down, not as legend, but as instruction. A sacred shape echoed again and again, not forgotten, just submerged. And here's the final mystery. Sonar scans suggest that parts of the city are still buried deeper under the seabed, hidden beneath silt and time. Only fragments have been uncovered. The rest waits, and the sea as always keeps its secrets. India's government continues to fund occasional explorations, but the site remains quiet. No major excavation, no tourism, just the wind over the Gulf and the occasional hum of research vessels scanning the deep. Locals still offer prayers on the shore, to Krishna, to Dwarka, to the sea, as if it might return what it took, or perhaps, more realistically, reveal what it never forgot. So when you stand on the coast at low tide with the wind in your ears and the horizon shimmering in heat, you might feel it. The pull, the quiet gravity of a city that once held towers, temples, and starlight. Not fiction, not fantasy, just the truth worn smooth by waves. And waiting, always waiting to rise again. The Australian outback isn't a place you stumble into. It's a place that swallows you. The red dust clings to everything. The air vibrates with heat, and the silence stretches on like an ancient dream that never ends. Most travelers stay close to the coasts, but farther in past the eucalyptus groves and spinifex scrub lie hills the wind has carved for tens of thousands of years. And beneath one of those hills is something almost no one talks about, not because it's too strange, because it's too old. This is the enigma of the Gympie Pyramid. And before you raise your eyebrows, no, it's not a perfect Egyptian-style pyramid rising from the earth, but what lies beneath this hill, just north of Brisbane, may point to something equally baffling: pre-Aboriginal construction built using techniques and materials unknown to the earliest documented Australian cultures, and possibly something far older. The hill itself looks ordinary until you realize it's shaped, terraced. The rock formations along its sides are not random. Long, flat sandstone blocks, carefully stacked, forming platforms that spiral subtly up the slope. And buried among them, unusual artifacts, not just Aboriginal tools or boomerangs, but carved stones with patterns, swirls, rectilinear symbols. A few bearing grooves that match maritime knot diagrams found thousands of miles away in South America. And then there's the statue. Now, missing once, photographed a small stone idol uncovered in the 1930s, showing a bearded man in a squatting position, arms folded, head adorned with a crown or headdress. Not an Aboriginal style. Not known in any Australian carving tradition. Some thought it was Hindu. Others said Sumerian. Some simply labeled it anomaly and buried the conversation. The mainstream archaeological community has long dismissed the site, calling it a modern construction, perhaps the work of early European settlers attempting to farm the hillside with terraces. Maybe. But the stones don't match the tools they had, and no records exist of any such agricultural efforts in that exact location. Instead, you find absence, a kind of heavy quiet, as if whatever was here simply stopped. No signs of erosion, no long collapse. Just the eerie sense that the hill was shaped long ago, then left alone, as if someone had written a sentence in stone and walked away mid-thought. Some local Aboriginal elders have hinted that the site was taboo even before colonization, a place avoided, not feared, but respected. They didn't build it, they inherited its silence. A few fringe theorists have proposed bold claims that ancient seafarers, Phoenicians, Egyptians, or even pre-Incan peoples reached Australia thousands of years before known contact. They point to legends of sky beings, to boomerangs found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, to trade winds that could have carried ancient ships across the Pacific. Far-fetched, maybe, but the Gympie site isn't alone. Similar terracing and mysterious stone alignments have been spotted throughout the Queensland region. Often buried, often overgrown, and always dismissed as geological flukes until you touch them. The blocks are cut, the joins are tight, and in one case, a slab bore a faint carving of a spiral sun, a motif found in South American and Central Asian ruins, but not among known Aboriginal iconography. One stone circle found nearby and now destroyed by construction was aligned with solstice sunrise and marked by a central altar stone bearing signs of fire charcoal residue dated not to modern bushfires, but to controlled burns thousands of years old. If this was a hoax, it's a big one, and buried deep. In 2004, a group of amateur archaeologists attempted ground-penetrating radar scans of the hill. What they found startled even skeptics. Beneath the terraces lay a network of voids, chambers, cavities. One rectangular in shape, almost 10 meters long, and perfectly aligned with magnetic north. But before excavation could begin, the site was closed, declared protected. The scans were shelved, and the mystery was reburied both literally and bureaucratically. Why? Because if proven true, this site would not only push back the known history of Australian settlement by thousands of years, it would suggest contact with advanced civilizations long before recorded time. And history doesn't like being rewritten, especially when the author is a pile of mossy stones. So what remains? Fragments, photos of artifacts now lost. A hillside that seems to remember a story we've forgotten, and legends, not in textbooks, in whispers. Some locals still claim to see lights on the hill at night, flickering silent, darting between the terraces. Not flashlights, not fire, movement. One hiker said he heard voices, soft, rhythmic like chanting, but found no one. Another claimed he found footprints in the dust bare narrow too long to be modern. But the next day they were gone. Was it imagination? Wishful thinking? Or was the hill telling its story the only way it still can? Not through language, through presence. You don't visit Gympie to find answers. You visit to hear the question, to feel the weight of a hill that might have been a temple, or a marker, or a door. And when you leave dust on your boots, sunburn on your shoulders, you carry something with you, a sensation that you've just walked across the top of a memory, one that isn't quite ready to let itself be known, but hasn't finished whispering either. There's a cliff in Peru where the sky meets the stone like a sealed promise. Not far from the better-known ruins of Machu Picchu, tucked deep within the sacred valley, stands a quiet monolith that stirs more questions than echoes. The locals call it Puerta de Hayu Marca, the Gate of the Gods. And if you didn't know what you were looking at, you might walk right past it. It's carved into the face of solid rock, a large flat rectangle nearly 23 feet tall and 23 feet wide, with a smaller recessed niche in the center, just over 6 feet high, roughly the size of a person. It's not a door in the way we understand doors. It doesn't open. It doesn't lead to a room. It simply is. But stand in front of it long enough, and you'll feel it's something heavy, ancient, unfinished. Not ruined, not broken. Incomplete by design. According to local legend, this is the doorway to another world. A priest named Amaru Muru once fled the Spanish conquistadors, carrying with him a sacred golden disc, an artifact said to have come from the sky gifted by the gods. Seeking refuge, he approached the portal and inserted the disc into a depression in the niche. Light filled the frame. He stepped through and vanished. Some say he entered the land of the immortals. Others believe he traveled to another planet. A few whisper he simply went back to where he came from. But the doorway has stood silent ever since, or so it seems. The stone around the niche is smoother than the surrounding cliff, almost polished, as if touched countless times. Some say it emits a strange energy. Visitors have reported feelings of dizziness, electric tingling along the spine pressure behind the eyes. One man fainted after placing his forehead to the niche's center. When he woke, he claimed to have seen a corridor of blue light and beings with elongated skulls who spoke without sound. Dream, heat stroke, or memory. The Inca and pre-Incan cultures who inhabited the region believed in gateways, not metaphorical ones, but real physical thresholds between worlds. They didn't separate the spiritual from the material. Mountains were spirits. Stones held memory. Stars were ancestors. And this door was part of their map. You can still see similar architectural cues at other sites: trapezoidal niches, smooth-cut windows, false doorways carved into stone walls. The difference is, those are part of buildings. This stands alone. No structure, no temple, just rock, just opening. One archaeologist called it a monument to transition. Another dismissed it as an unfinished quarry. But that doesn't explain the sheer precision of the cuts, the symmetry, the way the angles mirror certain star formations, specifically the constellation Orion's Belt as seen in 10,500 BCE. That date again, the same one linked to the Sphinx, to Gobekli Tepe, to the supposed end of a forgotten era. What was it about 10,500 BCE that so many ancient builders seemed to care about? And more importantly, how would they have known? There's another mystery here. Roughly 800 miles away lies Tiwanaku, the ancient Bolivian city, with its own strange portal, the Gate of the Sun, also carved from a single block of stone, also facing the rising sun, also aligned with Orion's belt. What were these people doing? Building spiritual artwork or following blueprints left by someone else? A few researchers suggest these gates may have served astronomical functions aligned with solstices, eclipses, or the slow movement of stars across epochs. That they were observation points, instruments even, but others think bigger. That these doorways aren't just symbols. They're part of a network, not a physical one, a spiritual architecture, a resonance grid designed to connect sacred sites across the planet. Stonehenge, the Great Pyramid, the Gate of the Sun, the Gate of the Gods, aligned not just with stars, but with each other. Not roads, not teleporters, but keys, each one activated by sound light vibration frequencies we no longer use. Maybe even ones we never learned, because we've forgotten how to listen. And the gates, they're still waiting. Some locals say the Hayumarka Gate glows faintly during certain moonless nights. Others report seeing it outlined in blue light during electrical storms. One shaman swears that a condor flew through it once and did not come out the other side. And if you ask him what he means, he only shrugs and says, the sky is not only above. So, what do we do with this? We call it myth or mystery. We rope it off with signs and guidebooks and offer polite smiles to the tourists who touch the stone and half wish to disappear. But maybe that's exactly the point. Because if this truly is a gate, it isn't broken. It's simply closed, waiting for the right moment, or the right person, or the right memory, a golden disc, a vibration, a voice speaking a name no one has spoken in 10,000 years. Maybe all of these ruins we've seen, every stone, every circle, every staircase to nowhere, they're not remnants. They're reminders, silent instructions for reactivating something we still don't understand. And maybe the gate isn't sealed. Maybe we are. And when the time comes, if the stars align and the chant is remembered and the disc returns, the stone will open, not like a door, but like an eye, and reveal not a destination, but a truth. One that's been waiting far longer than any of us have been walking. So now here you are, 30 sections deep. You've walked through silent deserts, wandered across lost oceans, scaled mountains that breathe, and stood at the threshold of doors carved into time itself. You've crossed bridges that disappear behind you, stared into idols still warm to the touch, followed ancient walls guiding water that no longer falls. You've heard the hush of cities that never spoke and felt the hum of stones quietly rearranging themselves beneath your feet. And through it all, one thread has lingered, that maybe our history isn't a straight line. Maybe it's a spiral. We build, we forget, we remember just enough to wonder. Maybe the stories left in the dust, the waves, the forest, the cliffside, are not warnings, but invitations to look closer, to listen longer, to pause before calling something primitive just because it doesn't shout its name in neon, to admit we don't have all the pieces, that maybe we aren't the beginning, and maybe we aren't the apex, that somewhere deep in the marrow of time, someone else was asking the same questions we are, and answering them in stone. We'll never know every answer, but maybe that's the point. Maybe mystery is the memory of something sacred, too big for words, too old for books. So let it linger with you. Let the silence beneath the sand speak. Let the stars be more than lights. And tonight, as you turn out the light and drift towards sleep, remember this: you are part of a story so long and so wide the earth itself can't hold all its pages, but every now and then it leaves one open for you to find.